Welcome to the 5th Seoul Brand Global Forum. It's a great pleasure to meet all of you, and I'm the MC for today's forum, and my name is Na Seung-yeon. We have the theme of Seoul Initiative, and this forum is about COVID-19 crisis and the fourth industrial revolution. And we are witnessing a new global era, and with the help of initiatives, we would like to develop the future direction for city brand, and we would like to highlight the role of Seoul. And we would like to proactively suggest the future direction for city and brand. And to become a global leading city, we have to explore opportunities for Seoul. So it is a very meaningful event. We have 3 sessions for today's forum. The first session is Pioneer Initiative, and in this new global era, new direction for cities will be proactively suggested by global speakers. In the second session, we to comfort Seoul citizens who are suffering from corona blues, we will have a healing initiative. And the third session is Paradigm Initiative. And for Seoul to lead the global city brand paradigm, we have to find opportunities for future direction, and domestic experts will have presentations and discussion. And we also prepared a real-time live streaming screenshot event for our online viewers. And please make a screenshot, and please use the following hashtag and upload the picture on SNS account. And we will offer diverse gifts, and I ask for your active participation. First of all, we will invite Acting Mayor Seo Jong-hyuk of Seoul City for a welcoming remarks.
제5회 서울 브랜드 글로벌 포럼을 찾아주신 여러분 환영합니다. 서울시장 권한대행 서정협입니다. 밀도 높은 토론과 발제로 도시 브랜드의 미래를 한 발 앞서 진단해 주실 국내외 석학 여러분께도 깊이 감사드립니다. 코로나19라는 낯선 바이러스의 등장은 경제, 사회, 문화 등 우리 일상 전반을 송두리째 바꿔놓으며 문명 대전환을 본격화하고 있습니다. 포스트 코로나라는 미지의 세계를 개척하는 일이 인류의 엄중한 시대적 과제로 떠오른 상황입니다. 특히 가장 시급한 변화가 요구되는 것이 바로 도시의 리더십입니다. 코로나19 팬데믹 수습 과정에서 우리는 도시 리더십이야말로 시민의 삶과 일상, 생명, 안전과 맞닿아 있는 인류의 생존 기제임을 학습했습니다. 오늘 포럼은 위기가 일상화될 신글로벌 시대, 지속 가능하고 건강한 도시의 미래를 이끌 새로운 도시 브랜드 전략을 논의하는 통찰의 장으로 마련했습니다. 서울시는 이미 세계의 모범으로 불리는 K방역을 선도하고 이 노하우를 세계 도시와 공유하며 협력과 연대의 리더십을 실천한 바 있습니다. 세계적 석학들과 함께하는 이번 포럼이 세계 도시를 선도하는 리더 도시로서 서울이 갖춰야 할 글로벌 리더십과 비전을 모색하는 뜻깊은 계기가 되길 기대합니다. 코로나 블루로 고통받는 전 세계 시민을 위로할 랜선 콘서트도 준비했으니 마지막까지 함께해 주시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Next, we will invite Chairperson Kim In-ho of Seoul Metropolitan Council for a welcoming remarks.
여러분 반갑습니다. 서울특별시의회 의장 김인호입니다. 코로나19가 발생한 지 벌써 10개월이 지났습니다. 전 세계에서 약 4천만 명이 이 병에 걸렸고 100만 명 이상이 소중한 목숨을 잃었습니다. 지금 이 순간에도 각 국가와 도시는 혼신의 힘을 다해 방역 전쟁을 치르는 중입니다. 예상치 못한 위기는 모두의 일상을 한순간에 무너뜨렸고 날마다 불안을 증폭시켰지만 동시에 앞으로 인류가 나아가야 할 방향에 대해서 그 어느 때보다 강력한 메시지를 전해주었습니다. 그리고 이 메시지의 중심에는 도시가 있습니다. 위기 대응과 미래사회 준비의 주체가 도시와 시민이 되어야 한다는 메시지입니다. 도시는 시민의 안전과 건강을 지켜야 합니다. 경제적, 심리적으로 공경에 처한 시민을 보듬어야 합니다. 더불어 코로나가 앞당긴 기술 발전을 더 많은 시민에게 교육하고 전파시켜야 합니다. 이로써 누구도 소외되지 않도록 해야 합니다. 그리고 변화된 시민과 함께 도시의 새로운 미래를 준비해 나가야 합니다. 전 세계는 이제 자신의 의지와 무관하게 4차 산업기술을 활용한 비대면 일상화에 동참하고 있습니다. 우리는 이런 변화를 빨리 받아들이고 이에 걸맞는 모습으로 도시를 재편해야 합니다. 서울시 의회가 함께하겠습니다. 도시의 위기로부터 시민을 지켜내기 위해 시민과 함께 도시의 활력을 되찾기 위해 최선을 다해 의정활동에 임하겠습니다. 성숙한 시민의식과 두터운 연대로 시민들이 지켜낸 서울의 명성을 서울시 의회가 더욱 오래 지속시키겠습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 환영의 인사를 해주신 두 분께 다시 한번 감사드립니다.
Thank you for the welcoming remarks once again. Today's theme is a Seoul Initiative. Due to COVID-19 crisis and the fourth industrial revolution, we are witnessing a new global era. City's future direction and Seoul's initiative as a global city brand will be discussed in the forum. Before starting the discussion in full swing with the title of a Future of Cities in New Global Era, Professor Kim Yoo-kyung of Dangook University of Foreign Studies will deliver a keynote speech.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all doing fine in this unprecedented global pandemic. Today, as the Seoul Brand Forum marks its 5th anniversary, we've invited world-renowned scholars to reflect on the past achievements of the Seoul brand and to explore its new future in this global era. Today, COVID-19 has limited us in terms of space and created a new online society in which we're new citizens. Let's take a look back at the global era, define the new global era, and explore the challenges for Seoul as a city. In the Paris World Fair, held 120 years ago, the electric lights and lamps shone the venue brightly thanks to technological development in the 19th century. Cities were no longer dark, and anesthesia and antibiotics were invented, freeing the mankind from fear of infection and surgery. Celebrating the glorious century that had passed, the world looked forward to a happy and colorful 20th century. But in only 10 years after the 20th century began, World War I broke out, followed by the Spanish flu. Thereafter, mankind underwent World War II mass destruction and development of nuclear weapons. The hope for a bright century was an illusion, and the end of the 20th century was very tragic. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times said, in a globalized world, due to rapid development of ICT and media, news spreads faster, further, and deeper, and in a cheaper way, leaving a starker impression. In human history, a pandemic always left lessons to be learned in the society. In the 14th century, the pest killed half of the European population, but agriculture, industry, financial capitalism, and the Renaissance was born. In 1918, the Spanish flu broke out to accelerate the end of World War, and social order was restored centered around the public health system. While the current pandemic has a similar ripple effect, when the COVID-19 crisis is over, what kind of change will our lives be surrounded by countries and cities face? The global era that led to the integration of the global economy had cities and countries as nodes, and it was an age of efficient network based on simple competition. Poor countries with cheap labor produced freely, and rich countries focused on production of value-added goods and services. So countries and cities coexisted based on a certain standard and form. As a result, Asian and African countries, the poor countries, were able to fight poverty, and the so-called neoliberal globalization was best utilized by China. In the past, with resources, the rich and poor countries, cities, and people had less gap in wealth, and efficient distribution and procurement of resources was possible. So sustaining the system and solving the inefficiencies seemed to be the way forward for the world. But based on globalization, resources and knowledge were efficiently distributed, accelerating freedom of ownership and production of knowledge, which greatly enriched the rich over the poor. In a knowledge-based society, the emergence of the elite and growth of knowledge production caused an unexpected level of economic inequality. Rather a problem of capitalism itself, it was a result of knowledge and information being used by the elite in an unlimited way to accumulate wealth in a system of meritocracy. This is the vulnerability of a stable global network. Until now, globalization failed to consider many variables needed for a stable global network. It moved toward distributed production solely based on competition. In the past, artifacts preserved or restored the inter-country or inter-city network, and COVID-19 artificially disconnected this. Countries and cities have closed down doors, cut exchanges, and undermined the ability to procure resources needed for networking inevitably. Michael Porter described globalization as borderless movement and expansion of goods and capital without limitation. However, Ian Golding said the quantitative expansion of globalization will create the pandemic, financial crisis, cyber terrorism, and other risk factors for the system and institution. Pope Francis also focused on globalization and unlimited competition leading to the harms of neoliberalism. He said that free movement in the market to be the only factor freeing the mankind and countries is an illusion. Facing the global pandemic, the global system revealed its weakness, and we realized that a freedom in the market cannot resolve inequalities threatening our society. Where are we headed after COVID-19? Henry Kissinger and global consulting firms including McKinsey said, the end or retreat of globalization. He said that after COVID, the world will become a fortified city centered around the nation and its people. No longer will it be a globalized world based on global trade and collaboration. We may start checking against each other, and we could be competing in a reversed globalization era, he warned. According to Paul Krugman, after the Cold War era, the global economic order shifted towards protectionism. And due to volatility, multinational companies suffered. And trade protectionism brought about a new kind of tension in the global community. It created a lot of wealth, But it was hyper-globalization without retrospection on the foundation. As a result, the network system between countries was threatened in terms of its stability, and the world transitioned to globalization, facing the decline of the global world. Globalization led to overall growth of wealth and obsession on wealth. The largest victim here were the people. It led to a loss in all areas, and we call it the era of loss. In the Davos Forum in 2019, Globalization 4.0 was announced to encourage sustainable economic growth, a future based on new technology, and the fourth industrial revolution. But COVID showed that we failed in predicting the future of the mankind. Now, the world must reflect on the true nature of globalization and its foundation. Also, we need to focus on new drivers or factors and the resulting new globalization or neo-globalization supported by creative thinkers. Then what is the new globalization? To give up globalization? We cannot give up globalization because it's our foundation. COVID has weakened the nodes, which are countries and cities, as well as the network. The world is returning to localization in every corner. How to overcome this phenomenon should be the center of focus now. New globalization is not something like Globalization 4.0, the fourth industrialization, or a globalization of the future. It's not a linear development model. In the global disaster caused by a global pandemic, we need globalization that embraces people and values shared growth. So, in the new global era, rich, advanced countries competing for fastest growth with unlimited potential cannot happen as in the previous global era. Rather, the new global era is where countries, cities, people, in a state of crisis, mobilize the spirit of community to collaborate creatively and coexist, but also compete, leading to an era of complementarity. In the new global era, what would be the challenges for cities and communities? First, to overcome crises such as COVID, coming up with a mechanism of mutual caring and bonding. In a global system, from a long-term perspective, we need a safety mechanism supporting basic safety and wealth among cities. In the previous version of globalization, we thought network between countries and cities are only beneficial. But with infectious diseases, financial collapse, and other crises with a spillover effect, the network has a contrary effect. So countries and cities that profit from excessive connection of distribution in the network for long-term mutual relationship should bear a sort of public cost for welfare or social protection. Secondly, for shared growth of cities need to first redefine itself and recognize the value of other cities in a new globalization model of citizenship. In new globalization, common values accepted in the global market does not have the upper hand. As individual cities protect non-economic values such as culture and morality, each city must mutually respect each other culturally to enliven the citizenship of fairness and consideration. At the same time, to respond to COVID-19 in a systematic manner, we need municipal Darwinism. For example, recently, Seoul has been reinforcing its disease control system to track and monitor risk factors in the various virus strains, which has been in the limelight with the brand S-Quarantine. Third, in the new global era, data flow with fast connectivity and platforms will be strengthened under the new normal of a super-connected era. after the pandemic. Due to the fear of uncertainty arising from new globalization, people will leverage technology that doesn't require contact to maintain the illusion of a safe and predictable world. The most fundamental change in the post-COVID era will be human relationship being replaced by a new normal optimized by machines and algorithms. Seoul has been recently working with industry to build public platform based on smart infrastructure to prevent and monitor risk, which we need to focus on. Lastly, the new global era will be a time where human-to-human relationship will be redefined and shared. In other words, people will complement each other's vulnerability and accept each other's possibility to maximize connectedness, thereby restoring the age of humanism. The Davos Forum and other global communities focused on globalization of imperialism led by states and companies. They saw globalization 4.0 as the key to improving the quality of life. The new global era should be a time of spiritual capital, where people are connected and we redefine relationships for a comprehensive improvement in the quality of lives. And this should be the center of discussion for the new global era. But the new global era will not be completely different. It's just giving a new meaning to globalization and reflecting on ourselves. The traditional globalization network should have a sense of community. Otherwise, if there is a vulnerability or crisis in community and cities, we cannot avoid them. In COVID-19, we saw this happen in neighboring countries. Let me wrap up now. By reflecting on the past, cities need to achieve qualitative growth and cooperate with one another to secure self-sufficiency. This is the true functions of cities to coexist based on cooperative governance. The role of the state has already been weakened. Cities and local areas need to strengthen local features and specialties while pursuing globalization in the new global era. City leadership in the new global era, or the Seoul Initiative in the case of Seoul, is the way forward for Seoul to contribute more as a global citizen and coexist with other cities as a leader. In the Seoul Brand Forum, I define the new global era as the time where shared growth and competition of communities complement each other. Now Seoul is at a position capable of leading the challenges in the new global era. In the presidential debate of the U.S., Korea's disease control efforts, or K-quarantine, which is in essence S-quarantine, has been discussed. We can open a new era focused on this brand of S-quarantine and build Seoul's brand. Based on the values of coexistence, passion, and relaxation, we launched the Seoul brand, and we need to expand this to embrace shared growth and connectedness. Let me close my remarks, and we will listen to the presentations of eminent scholars for the future of Seoul. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kim Yu-kyung, for the keynote speech. Now, let us begin the first session. As the professor stated, the theme of the first session is Pioneer Initiative, and in this session, we will listen to global scholars who will talk about the future of cities and their changing roles. So in the first session, we have a city and brand level, humanity and society level, and cultural level. So in total, we have 3 global speakers. First of all, at the city and brand level, the we will have a presentation on the city brand and the changing role. And the speaker created the concept of national brand, and he's a globally renowned city brand consultant. Let me give you Mr. Simon Anholt.
It's an honour to be speaking at this important and prestigious conference today, and such a pity that we're no longer able to enjoy such encounters face to face. A key item on the agenda is the question of Seoul's brand, especially in the context of the current pandemic. Has COVID-19 already affected the image of Seoul and other cities, or will it do so in the future? There are a couple of important points worth making before I try to answer this difficult question. The first is simply to ask why it matters. What difference does it make to Seoul's population, its government, or its businesses whether it has a good image or not? This may sound like rather an obvious question, but I always think it's worth reminding ourselves of the fundamental reasons why city and national governments should indeed pay close attention to the images of their cities and nations. Decades of research prove that places with powerful and positive images trade at a premium. It's simply much easier and much cheaper for them to attract foreign investment, business and leisure visitors, talent, major events, and positive media attention, while places with weak or negative images find that everything is much harder and much more expensive. So a good image isn't anything trivial or superficial. It has a direct and tangible economic, social, political, and cultural impact on the city or nation. My other preliminary point is about how we define the word brand. As I describe in my new book, The Good Country Equation, which was published this month, when I first coined the terms nation brand and place brand in the 1990s, I was talking simply about the images or reputations of places. I was not referring to the practice of branding, a set of techniques used in marketing communications in order to help sell commercial products and services, logos, slogans, product design, advertising, and public relations campaigns. Unfortunately, over the years, there has been a great deal of confusion about this terminology, and many countries, cities, and regions have spent a lot of money on these techniques without it making the slightest measurable difference to their international profile. Advertising, marketing, logos, and slogans are, of course, useful, even essential, when we're talking about promoting the individual products, services, and sectors of cities and nations. If you're promoting tourism or foreign investment or major events, then naturally you need to use advertising techniques, and they can be extremely effective. But these techniques are not designed to change the overall image of places, and research shows that they have almost no power to do so. No, when the image of a city or country does change or improve, this is only ever the result of changed behaviour. Projects, policies and actions which over a long period demonstrate to the world what the city or country stands for, what its values are, what it contributes to the planet and to humanity outside its own borders and its own city limits. In 2014, I conducted an analysis of the more than 1 billion data points which my annual survey, the Anholt Nation Brands Index and City Brands Index, had collected since 2005, measuring the international images of countries and cities. The analysis showed that by far the most significant driver of a positive image was the perception that the country or city has a positive impact on the world. In other words, people like good cities and good countries. This confirmed what I'd been saying for many years. Places are judged by what they do for the world, not by what they say about themselves. When a city or country, and the Republic of Korea is one of the best examples of this, starts to contribute meaningfully and visibly to the international community, this will improve its image. And the improved image will produce faster economic growth. This short chain of consequences is what I call the good country equation, and it's the concept at the heart of my new book. It's a reasonable assumption that any city or nation that works visibly, consistently, effectively and imaginatively to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on its neighbours, on its region, or even on the whole world, rather than just on its own citizens, will enjoy an improvement in its global image as a result. If it works the same way to tackle climate change, migration, pollution, human trafficking, corruption, conflict, human rights abuses, or any other global challenge, it can expect the same result. And that improvement in its image will produce, directly and in the short to medium term, an improvement in its ability to trade profitably with other countries. So the conclusion is very clear. If Seoul wants to do well, it must do good. Not do good only to its own citizens, but to people all around the world. Is there any evidence yet that this is happening as a result of certain countries or cities responding in the right or the wrong way to the pandemic? Well, the short answer is no, not yet, but it may not be long before we start to find out. The 2020 edition of the Anholt Ipsos Nation Brands Index has not yet been released, but an early look at the data suggests that the ranking of country images has remained broadly the same this year, despite the pandemic. The countries that have handled COVID-19 most effectively do not appear to show any statistically significant improvements in their images, and perhaps this isn't surprising. After all, the benefit of such behaviour is limited to the citizens of that country and doesn't directly benefit the people from other countries responding to the survey. There is some evidence, however, that the opposite is true. Countries that are perceived to have made things worse for everybody else have suffered a decline in their international image. I'll be releasing more information about the latest NBI results over the next few weeks as we complete our analysis. Seoul's international image has been steadily improving in the Anholt City Brands Index since 2013, from 36th to 31st to 30th to 29th place out of the 50 cities measured. This improving reputation is broadly in line with the image of South Korea as a whole, and this is surely a consequence of Korea contributing more and more to regional stability, overseas development, and of course popular culture around the world. It's an excellent example of a country doing good and doing well. Clearly, there's plenty of scope for Seoul to improve its image still further, and perhaps even to accelerate its progress up the ranking. At the moment, it ranks in the same group as cities like Dubai, Hong Kong, Helsinki, and Beijing. This isn't bad company to be in by any means, but I believe that over time it might be possible for Seoul to enter the group around the 20th rank in the index, which currently includes Stockholm, Madrid, Tokyo, Copenhagen, and Geneva. How would it do this? In principle, it's not complex. Seoul simply has to prove, consistently and in courageous and imaginative ways, that it is a powerful and principled actor within the international community. A city that manages to harmonize its responsibilities towards its own citizens and its own territory with a wider responsibility towards all humanity and the whole planet. Put simply, it needs to behave in such a way that over time, more and more people around the world simply feel glad that Seoul exists. This is very far from the traditional city branding approach that's based on buying media space to brag about your city's assets and achievements. Telling everyone how wonderful you are may make sense when you're specifically trying to attract tourists or talent or investment, but it won't change your image. And the approach to such a strategy isn't very complex either. Seoul simply needs to start a big conversation, including government, citizens, business and civil society, that produces some consensus about what's gone wrong with the world and what Seoul might do to help fix it. What are the challenges that city dwellers all over the world recognize and are concerned about? And which of those challenges might be the one that Seoul is particularly adapted to tackling? To use that phrase again, with courage and imagination. Seoul isn't going to tackle climate change or pollution or disease or inequality on its own, of course. The watchword of all effective action in the 21st century is collaboration, because all of these challenges are far too big for any one country or city to tackle alone. finding innovative and effective ways of working with other cities, regions and countries around the world to address the great challenges of our age is a fundamental responsibility of administrations today, whether at the national or subnational level. One of the best reasons for engaging in more collaboration, as I explain in the Good Country Equation, is simply that it produces better results. If a city wants to solve a problem, it will typically gather together all its experts and have a discussion about solutions. But the problem is that all those experts usually come from very similar backgrounds and from the same country. Consequently, they share a common culture. And since ideas are made of culture, it's unlikely that such a group will be able to produce very high levels of true creativity. If, on the other hand, your team consists of people deliberately chosen from the widest possible range of cultures, countries, age groups, genders, and professional and educational backgrounds, you are stirring up the gene pool and greatly increasing the probability of useful innovation. The main problem facing humanity today, the one that underpins just about every other problem, is that the international community still runs on a legacy system that was written in the 1900s and hasn't had a major update since. And yet the world has changed almost beyond recognition during the same period. The world's cities and nations are basically a group of 17th century warring tribes frantically trying to tackle a wide range of thoroughly globalized 21st century challenges. It's not surprising if we're not making much progress. Seoul has a unique opportunity to help lead the change that's required to make the world work better. If it can learn how to harmonize its domestic and international responsibilities, to work for its own citizens and its own territory while also helping people around the world and the whole planet, it will show the only way forward that is available to humanity at this point in its history. It really does seem to be a make or break moment. If the international community continues to fragment and more nations and cities turn inwards, focusing on their own problems and letting the rest of the world look after itself, humanity is doomed to decline and ultimately to extinction. As Benjamin Franklin so memorably said, we must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. But please don't imagine that I have a problem with competition. Competition is a fundamental instinct of human nature, and it has certainly helped to lift billions of people out of poverty during the last century. The global marketplaces that Korean companies operate in are inconceivable without the principle of competition as their principal dynamic and driving force. No, competition becomes a problem only when it's the only altar at which we worship, and that has increasingly been the case for the last 80 years and more. I don't have a problem with President Trump's mantra of America first. It seems to me a fairly obvious truth that anybody who is elected to run a country or city should put the interests of that country or city first. But where I disagree with his approach is the assumption that America coming first means that every other country must come last. America, of all countries, has over the centuries been pretty effective at showing how a country can come first, whilst helping other countries to aspire to the same goal. Cities can and should do exactly the same. And some of the most exciting new developments in international relations during the last 20 years have been precisely the emergence of Seoul and other world cities beginning to perform with a new confidence as actors in their own right in the international community, as diplomatic players with the vision and the flexibility to respond far more innovatively and quickly to new challenges than countries are usually able to do. Humanity's best hope for progress and prosperity in the next phase of globalization comes from learning how to harmonize cooperation, collaboration, and competition in a powerful combination. And we know this works from the experience of many industries. The Japanese auto industry, for example, began proving to the world back in the 1970s that the principle of co-opetition could help to grow an entire industry without compromising any of the healthy competitive instincts that made its best players so effective at what they did. Co-opetition is an experiment that is, in my opinion, several decades overdue in the international community and the way that cities and countries work together to tackle the global challenges. The point I wish to make in writing the good country equation is that collaborating a great deal more and competing a tiny bit less isn't a question of compromise, of self-sacrifice, of altruism, or even of morality. Countries and cities should collaborate not primarily because it's the right thing to do, but because it is in their direct and immediate interest to do so. Treating all governance as an international issue, which in our age of massive interdependence it surely is, isn't simply a necessity for humanity, it actually produces better results. This is the great benefit of globalization. Yes, we have allowed globalization to run out of control during the past decades, and many of our leaders have been guilty of failing to provide or prepare for its inevitable downsides. But to attempt to reverse or cancel globalization would be a huge mistake, not only because there's so much about it that's positive, but also because it's a fundamental instinct of human nature. Ever since we left Africa tens of thousands of years ago and stopped being a single tribe facing a common set of problems, the story of human innovation has been a story of us trying to get back together again. Now, in the 21st century, we have almost succeeded and are once again a single tribe facing the same problems. To retreat now would be madness and would probably fail. Seoul can play an important part in helping to design Globalization 2.0, the new version of globalization that's fairer, better managed, more thoughtful, and more sustainable than the previous version. Cities play a critical role in this debate because they are more than ever the way that humanity now lives. So we could also too easily frame branding Seoul as a simple exercise in city promotion. But isn't it much more exciting, as well as much more rewarding, to see it in this broader human and planetary context? Humanity today urgently needs new thinking and new experiments in managing its communities. And it's the great responsibility, as well as the great opportunity, for a city like Seoul to play a part in designing that future. Thank you.
So it was an impressive presentation about new evaluation criteria and strategic direction for cities. So listening to the presentation, now I wonder the ultimate direction cities and local communities should take. Do you have any advice for Seoul City?
Here's my advice. If you want to be admired, be admirable. All the research clearly shows that countries, cities and regions that people find most attractive are the ones that visibly work towards a better world for everyone, not just for their own citizens. So the more Korean cities and other communities work together with courage and imagination to harmonize their domestic and their international responsibilities, the better their images will become.
Be admirable. 그리고 도시와 여러 공동체 간의 협의.
The collaboration between cities and communities is the most important factor. Advice from Mr. Simon Anholt will be definitely reflected in future activities of Seoul City. Thank you very much.
The next will be a presentation on city branding in terms of humanity and society by Dr. Sorman, the renowned civilization critique. The title is Prospects for New Global Social Changes and Role of City in a Crisis.
My dear Korean friends, I deeply regret not to be with you, but because of this global pandemic, we are now condemned to communicate through this virtual media, which is much better than not to communicate at all. If I understand well, you have two major preoccupations. One has to do with the branding, the second has to do with globalization. Actually, both topics have a lot in common. And they also, you have decided to focus on Seoul And considering that Seoul is South Korea and South Korea is Seoul, which is very true, at least perceived from the rest of the world. I think that the best answer I can bring, hopefully, in your debate, has to do with the way I personally perceived and perceive today Seoul and South Korea. When I first came here some 40 years ago, and since that time I try to come back at least once a year, often more, South Korea was a totally different country, of course, and the scholars like myself who visited the country were always coming for the same reason, trying to understand why this poor, divided country, nearly destroyed by civil war, was suddenly becoming an emerging economy, and what was and is still today universally considered as a success story. So I visited, factories, car factories, Hyundai, and shipbuilding yards in Ulsan, and what I discovered were hardworking people with a lot of discipline, and they working very precisely, and they very sensitive to the quality of their work. And the quality of their work, this organization combined with the global strategy, focusing not on the domestic market but on the rest of the world, and the entering in the era of what later would be called globalization, evidently this was the recipe for economic success. However, something was missing and escaped my initial observation. There was an ingredient which does not belong to economics, and this ingredient is a culture, civilization. What brought all these hardworking people together was a common civilization, a very ancient civilization, and quite unknown in the Western world. In the Western eye, Korea has been stuck between China and Japan, but we hardly understood how different Korea was and how different Korea still is. And this difference is rooted in very ancient times, maybe 3,000 years, approximately, we don't know exactly. And there is a remarkable continuity in this Korean civilization from the origin until today. If you don't take into consideration this concept of civilization, I think you don't really understand what makes Korea different, what makes Korea attractive, and what makes Korea successful. This is very evident in the art. It happens that many of my friends in South Korea are artists, movie production, singers, theater, photographers, plastic artists, and so on, designers. And all of them are very contemporary, very modern, and they know about the world, they know about the other artists, but they're also very much rooted in tradition. And I've not seen that in any other country, actually. If you look at Japanese artists or Chinese artists, they want to forget about the past, and they're interested only in the future. South Korean artists, designers, but also entrepreneurs, are simultaneously focusing toward the future, but also very much interested in their past. And I insist on that because in all the efforts at branding and globalization, it seems to me that this concept of Korean civilization is a bit forgotten. You look outside more than you look inside. So, what is the Korean civilization? It's nearly impossible to define. I would recommend to people visiting Korea or discovering Korea to go to the National Museum in Seoul, which is a unique and not well-known place, and where visitors usually don't go, and where you will see 3,000 years of continuity. And maybe this is the best photo synthesis of what Korean civilization is about. And also there was a definition by Pak Nam-jun, the video artist whom I met years ago when he was living in exile. And he explained to me his definition of Korean civilization. He said, Korean civilization was born on the day when a Mongolian horseman met a rice-growing peasant. And I think this combination described the Korean civilization quite well. The rice-growing peasant is living in a rather disciplined world defined by solidarity. You can't grow rice without solidarity with your neighbors. But also this very strong individualist dimension of Korea, which is symbolically, of course, represented by this horseman coming from Central Asia. So Korea is the combination of both. I think that's the shortest, maybe not the most accurate definition you can give of the civilization. But I think this is very useful when we talk about branding. This interrogation about branding is, of course, not new. I mean, I'm hearing about it since maybe 30 years. And many people working on branding regret that Seoul doesn't have the Eiffel Tower or Mount Fuji or the Statue of Liberty, and it would be so easy to have an iconic representation of what Seoul is about. But if you don't have something as iconic as the Eiffel Tower, you have other iconic resources which I find underexploited. The landscape, the mountains, the river, which defines Seoul for centuries now. Some objects in the museum, I'm thinking mostly of pottery and the wide porcelain vase with a moon-like shape, which have been designed centuries ago and which look so modern. So I think maybe we could use all these elements to define what Seoul is about. This means that I'm not that enthusiastic about the logo which is being used now to promote Seoul. I think it's a bit abstract. It doesn't convey much meaning. Could be anywhere. And in a way, it's a kind of an imitation of the design which has been implemented by other cities around the world. There's nothing very much Korean about it. I may sound critical, but I just want to be positive and wonder if we could do better by exploiting these undervalued resources. I mentioned civilization, and I'll come back to it. I should mention also the notion, very important in the current world, of safety. I mean, the whole world has remarked that the strategy against the COVID-19 pandemic in South Korea was, of course, not perfect, but it was much better than in other countries. So Seoul was a safe city for its citizens and visitors, and now, in a way, it's safer than ever. So I think this notion of Seoul as a safe city should be exploited, and this notion of safety goes very far. You are safe in your daily life, you are safe from aggression, you are safe to go and visit the city at any time, and you are relatively safe against the aggression of illness or from people. So Seoul, the safe city. And Seoul, the ancient city. I would like to convey again this notion that Seoul has always been there. it's been ignored. It's been like a well-hidden jewel, a well-hidden secret, that's always been there. So you have Seoul, the safe city, and Seoul, the eternal city. What about smart city or dynamic city? Well, today everybody wants to be smart or look smart. Or everybody wants to be or look dynamic. So I don't think that the smart city and dynamic city are very useful concepts. I do prefer, personally, safe city, ancient city, eternal city. So this is a baseline, Seoul the eternal city or Seoul the safe city. How do you translate this into an iconic design? An idea came to my mind, rooted again in the Korean civilization. It has to do with the Hangul writing. It's a unique writing. Many people abroad don't know it, don't know how to read it. And I think that this way of writing, which is uniquely Korean, convey a message as well. You know, when you see an Arabic writing, you know it's Arabic. When you see Hebrew, you know it's Hebrew. And when you see Chinese, you know it's Chinese. When you know it's Hangul, you don't know it's Korean. So maybe a designer could synthesize all this, or the proposals I make, in writing Seoul in Hangul, or like if, I mean, in Hangul style, okay? Design letters which will be the Roman letters so that the whole world can read them, but with a kind of design which will remind the very specific writing way of Korean Hangul. So this would be my proposal, writing Seoul in Hangul-like style, and the baseline saying Seoul, maybe the safe city, or Seoul, the eternal city. Or third proposal also, which came to my mind, Seoul, the Asian hub. And it's a fact, I mean, Incheon Airport is the Asian hub. So maybe Seoul could capture this notion of a hub. It's very modern, it's very global. So I also like, beyond the safe city and the eternal city, the hub of Asia, or the Asian hub. Next item in globalization, but as I said before, both are very much linked. Koreans want to be recognized, I mean, as part of the global community, and huge progress has been implemented since 40 years, of course. Not only has become a democracy, it's become a democrat, it's an industrial country, and a giant in many disciplines and in many industries and services. But something is missing in a way. If you compare Seoul with London or Paris or New York, Seoul is a bit, I would say, parochial. Most of the visitors come from neighboring countries, China, Japan, a little bit from the Philippines, but not that much from the rest of the world. It's a bit parochial. I think one of the reasons is that very little efforts have been made to attract students from the rest of the world and teachers and scholars from the rest of the world. Why the United States or UK or France global? It's because they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of foreign students and foreign professors, teachers and researchers, which is not the case in Korea. Most of the foreign students would come also from neighboring countries, mostly from China. Therefore, there should be really a very dynamic policy to attract to Seoul universities scholars and students from abroad. I know that the obstacle is the Korean language, which is not widely popular as English or even French. But most of the higher education these days is bilingual. So I do think that the bilingualism in higher education is a way to get around the fact that not many people these days do speak Korean when they are not Korean themselves. So this would be my answer to this question about globalization. Okay, it should really focus on higher education as a way to create ambassadors for South Korea when they return to their country. And back to the iconic and the branding, I will only repeat myself in saying that the everything you are looking for is inside you, it's not outside. I mean, just give a specific example before I conclude. The architecture in South Korea, modern architecture is not that great, but you have one great building built by a Korean architect, that's City Hall. And people hate City Hall. I don't know why. I mean, it's uniquely Korean. You have no similar building in the rest of the world. And it's Seoul, and it should be the iconic building in Seoul. I always invite people to go and visit City Hall, which is absolutely unique and remarkable, and which belongs to now to your civilization. So you have to promote it. I think it should be stamps with the Seoul City Hall, and it's very bizarre that the Seoul would reject its City Hall when the City Hall is that remarkable and built by a Korean architect and Korean artist. Well, I would conclude here, and I think this is an ongoing process, and I'm no prophet. I'm just a friend of South Korea, which is a friend of Korea and the Korean civilization, and my encounter with Korean civilization in a way changed my life, and I do hope that it will change the life of many other people with your help and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Dr. Sorman talked about the opportunities of Seoul as a brand and advice for a Seoul brand to grow further culturally. I have two questions for you. First of all, to strengthen the power of Seoul brand, many activities are being conducted. What further effort do we need to make?
I'm no prophet, but however, you ask me many times about recommendations. I wouldn't say they're those recommendations, but suggestions. And one of the things which could be done maybe in a more systematic way is to connect your efforts at promoting Seoul as a brand with the efforts of the private sector. Far from South Korea, millions of people know Korean brands, Samsung, Hyundai, they know K-pop, they often know South Korean movies, South Korean books and songs, but they don't necessarily relate and connect one another. So I think there should be some kind of joint effort to work together more efficiently with the private sector and to convey the fact that when you talk about Hyundai, you talk about Seoul or South Korea. When you talk about Samsung or kimchi or K-pop, those are all part of the same iconic brand and the same civilization. So this should be one more suggestion that I would make.
Thank you for the great advice. My second question is this. I think the essential factor of city branding is sustainability. What are the ways for Seoul to improve sustainability for its city brand?
Hello again. I've been asked me how to boost the sustainability of Seoul City as a brand. I would make only one suggestion, continuity, which strikes me since many years you are working on either South Korea or Seoul as a brand, has been the discontinuity. The message is constantly changing, the communication is not always coherent, so from outside it's sometimes difficult to follow what you are trying to do. So to summarize once again, stick to one choice, maybe not the best one, but one choice, one brand, one icon, and just follow up and never change the message, but on the contrary, insist, and repeat.
Thank you. To strengthen Seoul's brand, the city needs to strengthen collaboration with the private sector and have consistency in the icon of message of brand. Thank you for the great advice.
The next presentation is titled "The City's Role via Culture and City Branding Strategy in New Global Era." The presenters successfully predicted the pandemic crisis, and he is a globally renowned scholar, economist, and futurist. Let me give you Mr. Jacques Attali.
First, I want to congratulate Seoul for his 5th anniversary of his new brand, which is an excellent brand and a wonderful occasion to speak about the future of a city and the future of the world as well. A good city is a city that can be younger and younger by finding ways to become younger. And your brand is a very subtle one, which demonstrates that Seoul loves people and that people love Seoul. It's a symbol that demonstrates, it's a brand that demonstrates the capacity of Seoul to be a democratic city because it has been chosen by a very large and thorough consultation, and it has been established with a lot of thinking because it has many sophisticated dimensions and significations and meanings. Congratulations for this brand and for the future of it, which is very strong. Seoul is also more than a brand. It's one of the most important cities in the world, and it has been recognized as the #1 in many dimensions, mainly in its capacity to be a digital city in all dimensions of digital, meaning digital for health, education, transportation, capacity for cities, for companies to work in it. And then Seoul is at the front of many other dimensions of a welcoming city. Seoul is also one of the top cities in the world for receiving foreigners, for receiving tourists, and for receiving congress and events from people coming around the world. And Seoul has also been, and it is a demonstration of its capacity, very resilient to the COVID, maybe more than anyone else in the world, even if from case to case there are some problems, in that unfortunately you suffer some deaths, and I must convey to you my condolences for it. But Seoul has been the #1 in the world in tackling this issue with a demonstration that it has a lot of hygiene, a lot of health capacities, a lot of mask tracing and testing capacities which are available and where citizens are used to accept it. Why do they do that? Because there is a very real consensus in this city as well as in the country on what is good for the city and good for the future. The COVID demonstrates that a good city is a city which is preparing for the well-being not only of citizens of today, but of citizens of tomorrow. It's what I call a positive society or a positive city. What is a positive city? A positive city is a city which is working in the interest of people that will live in this city in 20 or 30 years. In 4 dimensions: economic, social, ecological, and democratic. And Seoul is number 1 and pioneer in that. Seoul is a pioneer in helping the preparation of jobs for 30 years ahead of us by creating new technologies, by creating everything which is good for receiving smart cities, small and new companies, either foreign companies or domestic companies that will be created and will find good environment to work there. Therefore, it's one of the best cities in the world to prepare jobs for the generation to come. It's also very good to prepare the future for the next generation to come economically by having a large and high quality level of education for its citizens and people coming to study in Seoul. It's also a positive city because it's preparing people to be socially more resilient. And it could be also improved when it is needed in order to have all people coming from different groups, different social classes, able to live there. A positive city is a city where people in 30 years from now can find affordable flat, can find affordable public services, and can live together and share amenities with people richer or poorer than them. A positive city is also a city that is ecologically sustainable, and Seoul is in the good direction in doing that. Because Seoul is one of the leading cities in terms of parks, clean water, clean energy, hygiene, health, public transportation, reduction of numbers of cars in the future, development of electric cars, development of independent cars that will be able to be totally managed without any kind of driver. And that leads to a very sustainable city in the future ecologically, even if ecology and the climate change is not a problem only for one city, but for the whole world as a whole. And Seoul is also sustainable in the 4th dimension of positivity, which is governance. Because for a city to be positive means to be able to fight strongly for the benefit of minorities, for the benefits of weak people, in order to have more women in the decision body, more people coming from minorities in the decision body, to have a strong fight against corruption, and to have transparent mechanism of governance in the city. And I think that demonstration has been made by the way that the city has decided to create its own brand, that it is possible for Seoul to be sustainable in those 4 dimensions. It's also clear that as a whole, Seoul is a city that has been able to demonstrate that it is positive with its brand, which has developed a visibility for Seoul around the world. If I may add things that could be added to this example and this exemplarity of Seoul, I would have different things that Seoul can do better in order to be more and more a city of the 21st century. First, Seoul is a city that should develop more and more its relations with the rest of the world. And in the future, the relation with the rest of the world will go more and more with connectivity, either by a port, and it's why it's so important in my view that Seoul develop its relation with Korean ports, by train, by highways, by all means, by airports. It's important to develop relations of Seoul with the different ports, because the ports are the key for the future. And if Korea wants to stay one of the leading countries in the world, it has to keep having one of the most important harbor for goods and services in the world, which is the case today, and to have a link between its capital cities and the main ports in the country. This link and this infrastructure are fundamental. Second, the city has to become more and more digital in the future in order to develop even new services for the citizens. Using the technology of the future, I would mean that we need to, there is a place for Seoul to develop the use of AI, not only to monitor the risks linked to pandemics or links to security issues, but AI for the services of citizens. Citizens should found through AI good public services, very well adapted to them, tailor-made to them, and not only to monitor them, but to help them to be more efficient and more convenient for them. AI can be an instrument of monitoring, but it can be also an instrument of freedom if it's well used, and Seoul can be a place to do that. Other new technologies are coming, which are going to be very important in the future, and I do believe that it will be up to Seoul to use them to develop what they could do for their development. First, I think that biomimicry, which is a fact of imitating the nature, is one of the most important technologies in the future, and I do believe that it is in the interest of Seoul to develop a capacity to train, develop technology into that, which are used, for instance, it's through biomimicry that has been found the best way to optimize the ways to go through a city and to avoid traffic jams by imitating the way of maneuvering of ants in their trips. And then biomimicry is a fundamental technology for the future, and I do believe that is something that Seoul can develop and should develop in the future. Seoul can also be a leader in the technologies of the future, which are linked to environment. I would say that bioagriculture, gardens in the city, preparing of food in gardens, on the rooftops, garden on walls, vegetables in the buildings, all the development of a green city producing its own vegetables, which is already beginning, but can be much more developed by developing a new way of thinking the city through other kind of relations with the environment and with the surrounding countryside. It is clear that in this moment, people are going to look at living in many countries outside of cities because of COVID. After all, the technologies allow people to work from remote places, and they don't need to live in a city. They can live from outside, and many people will be having the desire to move to the countryside and to work at distance and come to a city rarely. It's why all cities, even the best city in the world, such as Seoul, is threatened by the danger of seeing people quitting the city in order to live abroad or away in the countryside and come in the city only when needed. We have seen already that Seoul has not kept all its population, but a population which is declining and can lose its vitality. It's a threat that all cities are going to face, and in order to avoid that threat, Seoul has to keep its capacity to attract citizens by having there everything that no one can find outside. I would say first, health. Health is going to be a key condition for people to live. People would like to be close to anything, and many at hospital. Second, people should find in a city like Seoul everything round the corner. It is what is called the 15-minute city, which means that everything should be in position to be found in 15 minutes, 1-5. A 15-minute city is a city which is a group or a subset of areas where almost everything is reachable in 15 minutes. Everything means food, education, schools, hospitals, theater, parks, all has to be in 15 minutes. And then if you think of what Seoul, it's almost true, but it's not entirely true. And if you want people to keep and stay in the city, you have to create that evolution of a city in order to have a group of 15-minute cities forming as a whole the city of Seoul. Of course, it has not to be for everything. There will be one town hall, one major opera house, opera theater, one major district for business. Of course, everything has not to be in the same everywhere. But you have to recreate a positive environment as a village in a city in order for people to keep willing to stay in large cities and not to move in the countryside. It's important also for the country as a whole, because the country needs a large city as a capital, and it's only in a large city that you can have serendipity, which means where you can have people who come back and forth and have ideas that they can exchange and find ways to have creativity. And for that, it's important to have not only a 15-minute city, but also places where people meet by chance and can create to create commerce. Coffees, places where they have not before creativity and positive self-generations, which really thinking will not take decisions, give our, I think, conceptive city, different social class, people, animals, and environment. It is not only many new longer term that Seoul can, if idea is coming forward. Smart, thank you very much.
To become a more
I saw you widespread. You should focus and promote the soul.
about measures to transform the entire city into a global icon. Thank you very much once again. Globally renowned scholars Simon Anholt, Sorman, and Jacques Attali shared their diverse perspectives on city leadership in the new global era. Let me express my gratitude to three speakers once again for the informative session.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the first half of this year, the sudden outbreak of COVID has left us depressed and tired. COVID flu has been spreading across Korea, unfortunately. To cheer you up, the Seoul Metropolitan Government has prepared a special event for your mental control. The healing initiative will be seen in session 2. In the second session, Healing Initiative, we have invited very popular people, the pioneers of a completely new genre, the Leenalchi band. To cheer the people who have been suffering from COVID flu, they will provide a special performance.
같은 앞다리 동화 같은 뒷발로 양이 찌그지고 새앗 같은 발톱으로 잔디뿌리 왕모래를 걷다 봄 내려온다 봄이 내려온다 송님 깊은 골로 한짐승이 내려온다 그의 머리를 흔들며 양이 쭉 찢어지고 몸은 얼숭덜숭거리는 산뜻한 말이 동계 같은 앞다리 종로 같은 뒷다리 해나 같은 발톱으로 사람의 깜은 산디 구리왕모래 걸리고 자라 배가 웃고싸우게 하는 소리 간절히 뒤덮고 땅도 지난 자라가 광장을 내몰고 치고 하늘이 엎쳐지고 봄 내려온다 봄이 내려온다 송이 깊은 불로 한층이 내려온다 그의 머리를 흔들며 양이 쭉 찢어지고 몸은 얼숭덜숭거리는 산뜻 봄 내려온다 봄이 내려온다 봄 내려온다 봄 내려온다 봄이 내려온다 봄 내려온다 봄 내려온다 봄이 내려온다
네, 이날치의 대표곡.
The band's signature song, which is very popular, was Tiger is Coming was performed in a new version. There are various keywords. We saw depressing words which could appear in the news, and at the end, we saw heartwarming and encouraging keywords. So it must be very unfortunate to let them go right after the performance, so let me have an interview with them. So I invited 2 members of the band. It's a great pleasure to meet you. First of all, please introduce yourself briefly. I'm playing bass. My name is Jong-woo. My name is Inare. I'm the vocalist. You must be very busy, and thank you for taking your time. There were important keywords for the performance. So how do you want our viewers to feel about the performance? So at the beginning of the video clip, each of us played the performance separately, and you saw, however, the cords of the microphone and the instruments are connected all together. So although we are in different situations separately, we are in this pandemic situation all together. So based on this common situation, we are heading toward somewhere altogether. That was the message. So it was a very entertaining performance, so I just focused on keywords and I didn't look at the chord. But I can watch the performance once again through the video clip later. There are many people suffering from the corona blues, and I was one of them as well. And there are diverse keywords in the performance. And what is your favorite keywords? Or what comes to your mind the most? So we reflected various stories when we were creating the keywords. So those are commonly used keywords, and we also included keywords of the past, the present, and the future as well. And our song title is Tiger is Coming, and one of the keywords was Fortune is Coming. And do you agree with the answer? We used a character named Hye-chi, and I thought it was very cute. And Hye-chi has the symbol of fortune and hopes. So this kind of symbolic meaning was well matched to the songs. So it was very heart-opening experience for me. I think you too are a good talker. So could you pick a keyword of your own to cheer up people on the spot? So personally, Tiger is Coming has a very popular lyrics or very popular part. So I hope you would have this kind of a flow of fortune and happiness in the future. So my keyword is waiting or patience. So it was very impressive to see yay in the keywords. So it was a message of encouragement, and I hope and I'm sure that your performance have given people energy. So what about you? So I know that you must be very busy, but do you also experience the corona blues? So the COVID-19 is also affecting you as well? So after releasing our album, we mostly provided performance on the stage. However, due to COVID-19, our performances have been cancelled. And most of the performances have been pre-recorded these days. So at the beginning, it was very hard to get used to the situation. We couldn't see the audience. We had to perform in front of the camera, but I'm used to it right now.
혹시 이날치만의 팁이라고 할까요?
Do you have any tips or advice to overcome the corona blues?
우리 시청자들하고 시민들
Do you have any tips for the viewers or Seoul citizens?
사실 인정하고 저희는
We just acknowledged the new normal.
새로운 공연 방법
And we thought about how we can perform in a new way in this situation. And we are still looking for new ways how we can communicate with the audience in this situation. We think about these ways continuously.
그러니까는 더 나은 미래를 생각하면서
But you mean that we have to prepare for the better future. So although the current situation is not bright, and as you just said, you should communicate with the audience on the stage, but it must be very hard for you right now as an artist. But you talked about preparation. So how are you bracing for the post-COVID-19 era? The performance culture has shifted to media these days. So we used video clips to communicate with the audience. Instead of releasing our video clips simply, we thought about what kind of art media we can combine. And these days, we can receive a reaction from the audience through comments section on the platform. And we read the feedback and we discuss based on those feedback.
그런 것들을 좀 더 긴밀하게 예를 들어서 뭐 궁금해하신다.
So, for example, if there is a question from the viewer, we can think of ways to create content to answer those questions. So we now focus on media and video clips. The video is a keyword for the next question. I know that your video garnered a lot of interest and attention on the video platform, and your video has been beloved globally. So many people watched your video clips and performance. And did you expect such interest and attention? And why do you think your video got such explosive attention? I know that people keep watching your video clips repeatedly, and I'm one of them. And why are you getting more and more popular these days? I cannot say that we expected such popularity. We just hoped that our song would get popular. But our song became a hit, but it is hard to find why our song made a big success. But when I think about the reason, we just blur the line between something strange and something familiar. We combined something new and we combined something old. And we created something very special out of those factors. Something strange and something familiar. I think you mean that you combine the traditional music and modern music. It must be very hard to harmonize these two different features. It was a new attempt, and it was very hard to make your own unique sound. So what were the difficulties in the process? So we have 7 members in the band. And all of us worked on music for a long time. Our vocalists started music 20 years ago, and performance as well have worked in the music industry for 20 or 30 years. And instrument performance and vocalists have abundant experiences. So our experiences have helped us make this kind of new music. Last question.
함께 견디고 또 힘들어하시는 시민분들을
We
위해서
have people who are suffering from the corona blues. So can you send a message of encouragement to them? First of all,
혼란 속에서 그래도
this is a
나름의
chaotic
질서를
situation,
유지하는
but
사회를
I believe that
만들어주시는 여러 의료진분들과
medical staff have made efforts to remain, to make the situation under control. And we also have public officials who worked on this matter very diligently. That is why Korea could maintain a better situation compared to other countries. So I would like to appreciate their efforts. Personally, I suffered from the corona blues myself. And at some point,
반대편에 있는 그 빛이라고 할까요? 좀더 선행 일반 시민분들의 선행이나 이런 것들이
I started to see the bright side. I started to see the stories of ordinary people who are doing good in this chaotic situation. So I felt that something important but forgotten has come to surface thanks to the pandemic. So I hope everyone would hang in together without giving up. Thank you for the message. So Mr. Jang, do you also have any message? One of the speakers shared a similar comment. We used to look at our environment and surroundings more, but thanks to the pandemic situation, we started to look inside ourselves. So once again, Mr. Jang and Ms. Lee, thank you for taking your time for this interview. And I will look forward to your future performances as well. Thank you very much. And thanks to the encouragement, I believe that Seoul is now filled with hopes. When the pandemic is over, hopefully global citizens will return to visit Seoul again, which is a city filled with hopes. On this note, world star BTS will introduce various aspects of Seoul in a video clip. Please enjoy See You in Seoul starring BTS, and I will see you again in the third session.
그렇게 모두의 여행은 닫혀 있었다. 이제 우리가 가까워질 시간. 어서 와요. 서울에 온 걸 환영해요. 왔어요? 먼저 서울 스타일로 변신. 어때요?
같이 걸을까요? 서울의 이야기를 조용히 들어봐요.
짠! 이번엔 짜릿한 서울을 즐길 시간. 배고프겠다. 서울 맛집으로 내가 안내할게요.
많이 기다렸죠? 대신 더 특별한 서울을 보여줄게요.
같이 보고 싶다. 우와. 함께 할 거죠? 약속.
여행이 시작되면 첫 번째 목적지는 서울이 되길 바래.
서울에서 만나요. See you in Seoul. I saw you.
You are watching the 5th Seoul Brand Global Forum with the theme of Seoul Initiative. Now we will move on to the third session, Paradigm Initiative. In the third session, Korean experts will deliver presentations and have a discussion. For Seoul City to lead the city brand paradigm in the global stage, they prepared a lot of suggestions. So let me introduce our speakers first. Director General Park Jin-young of Public Communications, Seoul Metropolitan Government. We have Professor Hye-bin from Kwangwoon University. Professor Jong-woo from Dangook University. And President Joo-ho from KPR, who is also the former deputy chairperson for the Pyeongchang Olympic Games Committee. First of all, Director General Park Jin-young from Seoul Metropolitan Government will deliver the first presentation on Seoul as a brand.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us in this forum. I'm Director General of Public Communications of SMG, Park Jin-young. Today I'm going to talk about Seoul as a brand, consideration and resolution on the direction and challenges of Seoul as a city brand. City branding, there are many difficult definitions, but in a nutshell, it's about the sum of expectations visitors and citizens have for a city. London, New York, Paris, Sydney. Today, we're going to discuss ways for people around the world to enjoy Seoul with these beautiful and flourishing cities. But just like these beautiful cities, Seoul suffered from a crisis from the end of February this year, and we're experiencing a repetitive cycle of relief and crisis. Movements are limited, face-to-face contact must be distanced. So we need to rethink the concept of city branding. Previously, the indicators for a city brand is divided into 6: global position of a city, attractiveness as a physical space, infrastructure and accessibility, entertainment, experience such as adventure, and economic and educational benefit. All of these indicators are valid only when people can travel around the world. So it's pre-COVID indicators. And it sees cities as a destination brand. Historically, looking at cities as a destination is inevitable. Xi'an of ancient China, Constantinople, and Rome, to New York of the modern times. Cities have been formed and developed by people gathered for opportunities and trade. So from a traditional perspective, when we look at the brand of Seoul as of 2019, in terms of the position, global position, and infrastructure, we're at the mid-top range on the chart. But the attitude to visitors, environment, scenery, and investment attractiveness, we didn't do so well. So, why is Seoul being undervalued in some areas? Respondents and evaluators, I believe, do not have insufficient knowledge about Seoul, I think. That is why. But based on these traditional indicators, we need to make efforts to enhance knowledge and understanding of Seoul. But at the same time, responding to the changes of the society, we need to prepare for new indicators. So we need a double-pronged, two-pronged approach. So that's because of this situation. Anytime the traditional functions of a city could be disconnected and paralyzed. We're living in an era of COVID. In this COVID era or post-COVID era, what are the new competences for cities? New competences can be divided into three. Even during the pandemic, the city must be able to maintain its functions, and it needs to be able to maintain cities' connectivity with other cities, and we also need resilience of functions after a pandemic. I believe these three competences during COVID and post-COVID will determine the brand of a city as important factors. In terms of these factors, let's evaluate Seoul. First of all, maintaining the function. During COVID-19, how much of the city function were maintained? When you look at this picture, it was taken at the height of the pandemic. You can see general elections being implemented without a problem, which has been widely covered by overseas media. Let's look at overseas evaluation. Deep Knowledge Group, a global knowledge consortium, has been continuously updating the safety indicator of countries against COVID-19. Number one is Germany, followed by New Zealand and Korea at the third. So Korea is at the top in Asia. Let's look at how other countries responded during this period. Except for Switzerland, the safest countries had to stop all the function and movements, and for at least 1 month to at most 3 months, people had to be disconnected. It means the functions of the city had stopped. But Seoul did not implement a full lockdown. We didn't close down the city. Reuters and global media focused on K-quarantine because of its smart city infrastructure and cooperation with private sector to develop test kits. Then how is Seoul able to maintain its city function, unlike other cities? We have 10 million citizens in Seoul and 20 million in the metropolitan area, but they were able to maintain the function thanks to mature community and a sophisticated infrastructure not requiring contact. And this was also possible thanks to based on mature citizen democracy. Voluntary actions took place, and government actions also gained trust, creating a synergy effect. Connection is the second indicator. How was Seoul able to maintain its communication with the world? I have analyzed the articles of world's major media outlets on Seoul in 2020. Articles on K-quarantine and K-pop topped the charts. Not only these two materials take importance, but the different view on Korea and Seoul is very crucial here. Innovation, surprise, new capabilities were at the headlines. And Seoul has been maintaining cooperation regarding COVID response with 40 plus cities around the world. And Seoul has been taking the initiative in this these activities. During the pandemic, Korea's professional baseball was broadcast on ESPN, the world's top sports channel, and K-pop led by BTS garnered success with online concerts. And SM's online platform helped maintain connection between K-pop and global fans. The world closed borders, but the movement of goods and trade did not stop in Seoul and Korea. Of course, cargo transport between major airports in Seoul has remained uninterrupted, and port operation is sustained at 90% of ordinary times. Investment did not stop as well. Despite the global economic crisis, foreign investment in Seoul continues. Except for investment from Europe, where damages from COVID was severe, investment remains solid. Thanks to connection in culture, sports, and academia, we have maintained growth in trade and investment. So I believe Seoul will be able to secure competence to overcome COVID and prepare for post-COVID era. The third indicator is resilience. When we face the post-COVID era, we need to be able to restore the functions of the city rapidly. Korea has been touted as one of the countries least hit by COVID, especially in Asia, which means that we can recover faster. Currently, Seoul has been moving away from short-term development and growth towards long-term and balanced growth. We have set a basic plan on the sustainable development in 2015 and made efforts to strike a balance between growth in environment, society, culture, and economy. Many targets we have already attained 90%, and we have made efforts to create Seoul that is able to respond to environmental changes with 17 new targets. And Seoul also has been nurturing human resources for the future. For the youth that will lead the future, we have been investing in spaces. We have created spaces dedicated for the youth so that they could enjoy the opportunity of growth. Seoul has also focused on non-Koreans. For the past decade, the number of foreigners living in Seoul has been continuously rising. Nationality, jobs, and their place of residence differs, and Seoul has built the Seoul Global Center to support their lifestyle. And we have been also hiring foreign public servants to meet the needs of multicultural families in Seoul. Based on the fundamentals that helped us effectively overcome COVID, we have been continuously making investments and creating spaces for the youth and multinational families and non-Koreans, which are contributing to strengthening our resilience. So these were my evaluation for the three indicators. Let me now talk about the challenges of Seoul and role of cities in post-COVID era. So Seoul has been making efforts to cooperate for global economy and climate change, and connection between loved ones has been disconnected or limited. It's a world without soft power due to disconnection, where only hard powers are clashing with each other. So in this era, scarce of soft power, the important roles will be played by cities that are the community of citizens. We need to have cities collaborating to restore soft power. In a time where the role of cities is expected to gain importance, Seoul is ready to hold events, connect, and restore. We are already prepared. Opportunities from crisis, if they can be utilized, and if Seoul could play a leading role in the coalition of world cities, the brand of Seoul will hold a new place in the hearts of not only residents and visitors, but also people around the world. I hope the Seoul brand could be loved by global citizens, respected, and shared through further growth. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. The next presentation will be given by Professor of Industrial Psychology of Kwangwoon University, Ms. Hye-bin Lim. She will talk about exploratory study on the evaluation of city brand image in the new global era.
Good afternoon. My name is Im Hye-bin. I'm a professor of Kwangwoon University. And now we are in the pandemic situation, and my research team developed the tools to evaluate the city brand image. And what is a city brand? Before, many speakers shared the definition of a city brand, and briefly speaking, city brand is the identity of that city. Then how do people evaluate the identity of the city? In psychology, when people hear the name of the city, they use the information in their heads. So when they hear the name of the city, they bring up some associated images, and that is the identity of the city. And based on the characteristics of the city, it would determine the positive or negative image of the city. That is why major cities in the world are building branding strategy based on the slogan and logo. And most of the people think of public relations when they hear city branding. However, the beginning of the city branding was the awareness or the status of the city, and it was first used in the study. So researchers around the world have thought about the measures to evaluate the city brand, and survey is the most representative way. And today we listened to Dr. Anholt, and he was one of the renowned scholars who developed the evaluation tool. And we call it measurement. And measurement explain the characteristics of each indicator. So for example, we consist a survey of sentences such as this city is safe, this city is clean, and the respondents answer according to the statements. So we ask questions about the nature of the city, and we include the nature on people's recognition, and the recognition is changing with the time. And Mr. Acker also stated that the evaluation changes based on situation or environment. And you can think of the detergent. When you think of detergent brands, you would think about eco-friendly factors of the brands. However, eco-friendly was not an important indicator only about 10 years ago. However, now eco-friendliness is an important indicator and measurement to examine the image of the brand. Then what would be the focus after the COVID-19 crisis, and what kind of characteristics will become the important indicator? In 2020, many media and researchers talk about post-pandemic city brands, and people will focus on health, technology, and environment. In business researches, the focus of city brand will be changing. And before, we focused on tourist destination factors and investment opportunities. However, after pandemic, hygiene and control against disaster and virus will be important factors, and how much efforts they are making for the health of the citizens, it will be the new criteria. In July this year, Korea released the New Deal policy for Korea, and it is in step with our study. Digital New Deal was one of the axes, and Green New Deal was also included, and safety net reinforcement is also included. So these are the major factors for city brand evaluation as well. And I talked about the new evaluation tools for city brand after the pandemic crisis. So important factors are changing with the time, and the evaluation tools should be changing as well. So based on this concept, we thought about the healthy city and technological city and environmental city, and we developed new tools and measurements. And based on these measurements, we surveyed what is global people's recognition on Seoul. So we had 3 steps for development, and the first step was literature analysis and what are the important and necessary measurements for city brand evaluation. And second, we looked at the competence of the city, which was neglected in the past, but it is getting attention these days, which are health, tech, and environment. And the last step, we secured and confirmed new questions about the survey. And we included 1,043 adults living abroad, and it was an online survey conducted for 15 days. And they answered our questions we developed. And the gender proportion was similar between 2 genders, and we also took the age into consideration, and we had North America, South America, and Europe, and Asia, and other continents. And about 40% of the respondents have visited Seoul before. And since we need basic awareness of Seoul, we also asked how much awareness they have on other major cities such as New York and Beijing. So 6 means they know about the city very well, and 1, it means that they don't know at all. And about Seoul, their point was a 3.4, which is about the median. And their awareness of Seoul and their awareness of other major cities in the world were similar. So Seoul can be called a city which is very well known on the global stage. So these are the examples of the measurement, and these are 15 statements we finally confirmed. And these 15 sentences are called PCBM, which refers to the post-pandemic city brand measurement. And I will keep calling it a PCBM throughout the presentation. And they have 5 categories. And this category represents 5 competences of the cities. And each competence is analyzed in more detail through sentences. So safety measures the competence to keep the city safe. And in case of Seoul, we changed the sentence into Seoul is capable of protecting its visitors or people. And for environment, we looked at how much efforts the city is making to harmonize the environment with people. And for health, whether the city is equipped with quarantine capabilities, and whether the technology is trustworthy. And in case of tech category, we looked at the development level of infrastructure and how much the city is open to new technologies. And for culture, how much appealing culture is there in the city. Looking at the table, we wrote the median point for Seoul. So the full score is 6. And in general, most of the categories recorded more than 4 points. That means respondents have positive images about the Seoul's competencies on each category. So we asked all the respondents this question. What comes to your mind first when you hear the name of Seoul? When we asked this question, there are various answers. And based on the keywords, we made a word cloud. And so as it was mentioned more frequently, it was written bigger. So we have technology, and we have tourist attractions, and we have K-pop, which are related to the cultural competences of Seoul. And the result of word clouding shows the competences of Seoul in each category. And PCBM analyzes the detailed competences of each category. So it will help us evaluate the city in general and how much attractiveness is there for Seoul for the respondents was measured. And these figures represent the score for each category, and they are correlation coefficients. So for example, the statement, I like Seoul, and it is correlated with technology on the point of 0.468. And for culture, the coefficient was 0.569. That means if people give a higher score to culture category, they are more inclined to like Seoul compared to people who gave higher points on technology. So I don't have time to go in too much details, but if they say, I like Seoul, I trust Seoul, and I have intention to visit Seoul, and I have intention to recommend people around me to visit Seoul. So these were sentences we used. And we also found out that all the results had a positive result with each category. So simply put, there are 5 competences, and all these 5 categories are related to the positive image or awareness of the city itself. The purpose of the study was to measure the major competences after the pandemic crisis, and we found out that PCBM had a certain relationship with the city brand personality. And Mr. Fiske said that we have 2 fundamental questions when we evaluate people. How warm is this person, and how capable is this person? These are the 2 fundamental questions. Warmth and competences are the major factors to determine respect, jealousy, or sympathy for that certain people. And it will impact our attitude toward those people. So marketing researchers say that brands are recognized as people to others. So in this context, when people evaluate a city brand, they will consider city brand a person instead of something vague. That's why we looked at city warmth and city competence. So with this logic, we measured what is the people's recognition on Seoul's warmth and competence, and how these 2 are related to our 5 competences. So out of 6, we measured the result, and if it is close to 6, it means that people think Seoul is a warm city. So it is about 4.66. And for competence, it is 4.78. So Seoul is recognized as a city which is warm and competent at the same time. So we included New York, Paris, Tokyo, and Beijing together in the table. So the result for 4 other cities is not very different. It is a minimal margin of 0.02. However, Beijing is lagging behind in warmth. So we didn't measure the detailed competences of each city, but that is why we don't know the detailed reason why this result took place. However, the result supported our hypothesis, and that is enough for us. And these are the 5 categories once again, and we looked at the correlation coefficients. So all the 5 competences were related to 0.5 level with warmth, and it also have a positive correlation with competence as well. So if the city is warm and competent, they all get higher score on 5 categories. So in case of environment, it is more related to warmth, and in case of technology, it is more related to competence rather than warmth. So based on the indicator, the image of the city could be different, the result could be different. But to evaluate the iconic characteristic of the city, we need further research. So let me wrap up my presentation. Our research looked at post-pandemic crisis, and we developed new evaluation tools for city brands. And we developed the new city brand measurement to find out that security and environment and hygiene will be the important factors in the future. And in case of Seoul branding, I believe that Seoul achieved a lot in terms of awareness. When we compare Seoul to other major cities in the world, it is not lagging behind, and it is recognized as a warm and competent city. But now, out of these competences, we should find a differentiator, and how we will build and deliver this identity, this qualitative research is needed. And global citizens are paying attention to new competences, and Seoul is equipped with those competences. This is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much. Thank you for the great presentation. Let me move on to the third presentation. We will invite Professor Jong-woo from Dangook University, who will talk about the story of COVID-19 and Seoul city branding.
Good afternoon. I am Jong-woo, professor at Dangook University, and I will talk about the story of COVID-19 and Seoul city branding. I'm highly interested in country branding and studied brands related to countries and regions. I've been studying everything that can be branded. Today I'm going to talk about the city branding and also the relationship of city branding and COVID-19. There are academic studies included in my speech, like charts and statistics, but I will try to use layman's jargon. I believe that you are familiar with the term brand. It's also used as the term trademark, but how are they different? Generally, they're not much different, but brand, compared to trademark, has a much more complex meaning. A brand is centered on the identity of a company. It's a strategic expression of a company or a product. The most accessible form would be a visual symbol inherent with various meanings. To compare a brand with an iceberg, there's more below the water than at the tip, which means there's more to a brand than what is visual. Brands can be applied to not only companies but also many other things. For example, celebrities, politicians, athletes, CEOs, so people, government agencies, public organizations, so government, country, city, including the city itself, district, town, and villages. So it can be applied to many areas. Recently, the public sector has been highly interested in the brand and has been emphasizing on its importance. Before talking about city branding, let's take a deeper look at brand itself. First of all, let me explain the term local brand. So, local brand is approaching a region as a brand. Within it is the country brand that includes the city brand. In addition, we have a smaller community brand as well. In tourism, they use the concept destination brand. And as previously mentioned in presentations, it focuses on a place as a travel destination, so it's a special form of a local brand. So the local brand includes the country brand and city brand. Branding a country or a region can help us expand into the area of public diplomacy. There was a journal called Place Branding that published articles on place branding. And it has renamed itself as Place Branding and Public Diplomacy to include the concept of public diplomacy, which means that other than building a brand asset, it includes a lot of different meaning. Let me move on to the country brand. Country brand is an approach that sees the country as a brand. It's the most studied area in the field of local brands. In the previous administration, there was the Presidential Council on Nation Branding and made a lot of efforts to manage the country's image. And a lot of studies followed. It's not easy to explain the country as a brand because it's a humongous entity. It's hard to explain the country as one identity. So in the discussion of country brand, people tend to focus on the visual identity as a means of communications because of this reason. One leading example of the visual symbol of a country could be the flag. And governments also use, and agencies also use different symbols. Until now, Korea's visual identity has been changing constantly, and depending on the administration, it has been used in different ways. When you look at this table, we have a separated brand for the country and tourism. There were many changes. In fact, this is not that desirable because it's difficult to build a country brand. If you have set one strategy, you need consistency in maintaining it and also in communication. Changing a symbol does not really mean you have a different identity. Between Dynamic Korea and Creative Korea, you may have preferences. But in my opinion, Korea, of course we want to be creative, but it's a country where people work hard and play hard. It's a dynamic country. So to build and manage a country brand asset, we need to first come up with an identity and set the main channel of communication and manage it in a strategic manner in the long run. We also have the city brand. Just like countries, cities can be branded. The city brand is closely related to the country brand because you cannot visit a country without visiting a city. So in terms of brand hierarchy, we need to manage the brand in an integrated manner with an organic coordination between the country brand and city brand. And we also need to have a portfolio management of different city brands under the country brand. So if we say the country is the mother brand, the city would be the product brand, a sub-brand. So a sub-brand portfolio is strategically very important. Seoul is a large single city, and Gyeonggi province is a collection of different cities. So their brand hierarchy and portfolio would be different. So they need different approaches and strategies. The mother brand of the country affects the city brand, but reversely, the city could have a positive impact on the country brand. So we can explain this as a spillover, mutual spillover. As you see in this pie chart, taking Korea as an example, some cities share a lot of common factors with the country. And there are cities that have differences, so we have many different city brands. The most important thing is we need to share the positivities of the mother brand and also build a unique, original brand asset for the city. Let's talk about the city brand logo. I would like to introduce one paper which is written by me. So visual symbols are the leading forms of brand, and this slide shows differences in countries. It's a study on the brand design, city brand design for Korea and Japan. Can you see the difference? So when you look at the results, in Korea, municipalities have been making efforts to build a city brand for years. So when you look at Korea's city brands, the logo is more colorful compared to Japan. It can be flamboyant and loud. And Korea likes bright colors, strong colors. And in terms of designing the city name, Korea uses word marks often. In terms of speech, this is closer to direct speech. Let's take a look at Japan's logos. Their logos are symmetrical and balanced. In terms of the color palette, they like neutral colors, leaving a soft image. You know the character Hello Kitty? Japanese prefer pastel colors. Now let's talk about the city brand of Seoul. There are a lot of factors impacting the city brand, including competence and image. The most universal way to build the brand is advertisement, but there are also alternative communication channels. Just like product brands, the perception of the consumer is the key factor, so we need to leave a certain expression for the city. According to studies, in the case of New York and London, the musical industry of the city can impact its brand. And we had the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in Korea. Pyeongchang was able to build a positive city image thanks to the Olympics, which was the same with the case of the Seoul Olympics in the past. Seoul became a global city thanks to the event. Not only large events like the Olympics, which is hard to host, small local events can also influence the building of a city brand. There are many examples, such as film festivals and horticulture fairs. Seoul has a unique position. From the perspective of non-Koreans, it's hard to distinguish the Korea country brand with the Seoul city brand, but it's a competent city with a unique branding. So it's being positively influenced by the country brand and at the same time building its unique brand. And Seoul has been utilizing a lot of characters and brand slogans. Managing the visual communication and competency are all important factors for maintaining a strong city brand. These days, people talk about COVID all the time. That has been hitting cities and countries very hard. And nowadays, response to COVID is seen as an important factor for countries' competitiveness. In the case of Europe, the central and local cities clash because of this response. And with the prolonged COVID crisis, people's perception of its danger and seriousness has been increasing. According to studies on MERS, the usage of media impacts confidence on government, and this in turn strengthens the risk perception of an infectious disease, which are very important concepts. These indicators show that there are differences in the perception of a country on COVID, which also impacts country's image. Let me introduce one quantitative study. It looked at Korea, the US, and China and conducted a survey on the perception of COVID. And Chinese took the danger of COVID most seriously, followed by Korea and the US. And regarding the perception of seriousness, there's not much difference between Korea and China, which are larger than that of the US. So this explains people's tendency to wear masks. Let's take a look at COVID-19 and the city brand. Countries have been reevaluated based on its response to COVID, and even advanced countries have been suffering in the response. In the case of Korea, thanks to strong control measures, we've been minimizing the number of daily infected patients, garnering positive evaluation worldwide. So to look at the relationship between COVID and the image of a country or cities, I conducted a research on Chinese, a survey on Korea and the city of Seoul. I chose China for this survey because it was the first country to experience COVID-19, and it's one of the largest markets for the brand of Korea and Seoul. There were 223 respondents, 77 male and 146 females, and the age ranged from 18 to 65, and the average age was 26.2. So I used the hierarchical regression, and health involvement had a positive impact on the attitude toward Korea. To explain in layman's words, people who are more sensitive to health or have a positive attitude to Korea, and also the government confidence on the government has an influence. The city of Seoul has been proactively responding to COVID-19, which has a positive impact on its brand. Managing the COVID situation in a city with a population of 10 million is very difficult and meaningful, and it could be utilized effectively in building a city's brand because it's rare to find in the world. So I used the intention to visit to analyze the attitude toward the city. Health involvement and confidence toward the Korean government impacted the attitude towards Seoul. And on the intention to visit Seoul, health involvement and seriousness perception had an impact. So people who take corona seriously and are sensitive to health have a higher tendency and intention to visit Seoul, which means that the city's image in responding to COVID has an influence on the city's overall image and the country. So city brand is related to urban planning, marketing, advertising, and tourism. And the city brands hold different aspects, practical aspects and emotional aspects. So you need to encompass both of them in your brand strategy. The symbols and visual icons can be a way of emotional communication, and city's competence can be related to the practical side of the brand. So responding to COVID could be an important factor in determining the competitiveness of a city. When you look at the past examples of companies, overcoming a crisis effectively contributed to building a brand asset. The important thing is we need a consistent brand strategy that goes beyond one term of the mayor or an administration. We need a long-term strategy to build and maintain the brand. These days, its movement is limited, so we need emotional communication with the consumers in terms of promoting our competitiveness and achievements of the city. When you look at media articles of Korea, there are a lot of exchanges and cooperation between small cities to strengthen the competitiveness of a city, to build a mega city. It's not easy, but it's all part of the efforts to reinforce the city's competitiveness. The current crisis can be a crisis and an opportunity to individual cities. Small cities that were not known can make a great impression in this crisis, and Seoul needs to continuously communicate its substantial competitiveness and maintain its image. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Professor Jeon. The next presentation will be given by the Vice Chairman of the Pyeongchang Olympic Committee, Joo-ho, the CEO of KPR, will talk about why Seoul.
Good afternoon. My name is Joo-ho, CEO of KPR. So my presentation title is Why the Seoul Initiative. Before jumping into the topic in full swing, I will talk about what global cities are. So when I work on public relations and marketing, and I also have experiences in sports marketing, so I visited various cities around the world, and all the pictures are taken by me. So in Las Vegas, we have a CES, and in Barcelona, we have MWC, and in Berlin, we have IFA, and in Hanover, we have a CeBIT. So when we have new electronics releasing on the market, they release their products in these exhibitions, and numerous media covers the release of new products in these events. In case of a motor show, we have 4 major motor shows in Detroit, in Geneva, Paris, and Frankfurt. So all the major automobile brands release their products and present their products in these motor shows, and they select the launching destination there. So in case of Detroit, we remember the city as a city of automobiles. So this is the image of the city. And I took this picture at New York Fashion Week. And we have electronics convention, motor show, and fashion weeks. And these are very popular events. And they drive the city brand image for the cities. The global conventions and cultural events and sports events were mentioned. However, on top of those events, we need to think about the content producing capabilities and the infrastructure of those cities. And in total, we can build up the identity of the city brand. And in this context, how is Seoul look like to the foreigners? It was already mentioned before, and in various aspects, Seoul is considered competent. So when we look at the city competitiveness index, Korea is ranked number 7. And we also have more than 70,000 visitors to Seoul, although it is faltering due to the COVID-19. And in case of 2019, the score was about 4.43 out of 5. So Seoul is lagging behind other major OECD countries in some areas, but most of the categories have positive results. And I worked on public relations for G20 summit, and the budget for public relations was over 10 billion won. And G20 summit, after G20 summit, most of the global summits were hosted in other cities than Seoul, including Busan. However, still, when we look at the number of conferences, Korea is ranked number 3. In 2018, the number of conferences hosted in Seoul was 413. And sports plays a key role. As the professor stated before, Seoul Olympic Games may help Korea make a leap forward in economics. And we also had 2002 World Cup and Asian Games in 1986. And other than that, we had sports events in Gwangju, Daegu, and Pyeongchang. And most of the international sport events were hosted in cities other than Seoul. Recently, the trend has shifted toward other cities than Seoul, so Seoul did not host many major events recently. And urban regeneration is another keyword in Seoul. And Seoul listened to experiences in other cities, and we provided many experiential projects such as walkway regeneration. So various activities have been conducted in this context. And in terms of a brand, in 2015, we launched I Seoul You. It is people-centered brand slogan. The people voted for the slogan, and they determined the name of the brand. And in case of Steve McCurry, BTS, and Josumi, they are celebrities. And in case of Steve McCurry, he's not a celebrity, he's a photographer. But they made the content to publicize Korea and Seoul. And they covered the past, the present, and future of Seoul. And they expressed the passion and value of Seoul. And based on the reputation Seoul has built up until now, it should send more global messages, and it should be able to send a global agenda from now on. And as mentioned before, we are living in the new global era. And cities should present new capabilities. And up until now, we built agenda at the national level, and we made treaties. We signed the treaties between countries for that. However, now we more focus on unity between cities, so that we can ensure convenient and peaceful daily lives of global citizens. It is especially important in the pandemic situation. So we need to support the comfortable daily lives of global citizens. I think that is the duty of the cities. So in the new global era, this is the city leadership looks like. So I have 3 axes. Due to the COVID-19 crisis, we will see new evaluation criteria for cities, and we will more focus on soft power. We need to recover the insufficient soft power. In Korea, we have built our cities and urban areas a long time ago, so we need to expand the infrastructure and we need to regenerate urban areas. And to play this role, cities should remain destination. It should be able to send messages more actively. And what kind of city is Seoul to people around the world? And the officer from Seoul City mentioned this. And Professor Simon Anholt also mentioned this. We have a people, dynamism, and presence. These are all the important factors. However, in the pandemic situation, we are facing a new normal, and we have to adopt new criteria for evaluation. Korea had success stories of K-quarantine, and research at Cambridge University evaluated Korea as #1 country in terms of COVID-19 quarantine. And ISO adopted drive-through screening station as a new standard. And PCR diagnostics was registered as international standard as well, and it will come into effect in November. Based on these achievements, Seoul hosted a CAC summit, and there we shared the achievements of K-quarantine, and we spread the new information to other cities around the world. So I believed that Seoul is playing the role as a standard city in the world, and we need 3 axes to make Seoul as a global leading brand. First, sustained branding. Second, hardware as content. Third, software as content. First axis is sustained branding. This is the example of New York. On the left side, it is the ground zero of 9/11 attack. And on the right side, you are looking at one column of the building. So they made the artificial lake there to remember the attack and honor the victims. And this has become the symbol of New York. And this monument is attracting so many visitors now. And as you know, I Love New York has become the major character of New York, and most of you have bought I Love New York goods. And New York hosts CBS, NBC, and ABC headquarters, so they are the hub of media. In Seoul, our media coverage is confined to Seoul mostly. But New York is different, and it has helped the city to become the global hub of media. And another example is Singapore. It has conducted a continuous branding, and it has been very successful. And Singapore is a city country, but they have 1 million more visitors. And according to WEF, Singapore was ranked #1 in national competitiveness, and they host the most international conferences every year. So Singapore is #1 country for international conferences. So when we conduct multifaceted and continuous branding, we can find 3 major factors in successful branding. First is the iconic image of the city. For example, in New York, they have a Statue of Liberty, and in Singapore, they have a Marina Bay Sands Hotel. And in terms of international conferences, New York has UN headquarters, and in Singapore, they have the best quality convention centers. And in terms of soft power, in New York, there are musical performances which is on throughout the day. And in Singapore, they have Universal Studios attracting many visitors in Asia. So all these factors attract visitors to the cities. So this is the successful factor of city branding. And second is about hardware. It is very hard. I'm not so sure whether I can talk about this or not even. But in the past, when former President Lee Myung-bak was the Seoul mayor, I worked on various projects. And there were various infrastructure projects. And for visitors to Seoul, those facilities were very helpful to provide experiences. And Bilbao is another successful branding example. And Guggenheim is located in New York. But Bilbao was a still city, which was declining city. But they hosted Guggenheim, and the city made a leap forward to become a city of art. And this is the picture of Yankee Stadium. I took this picture on my commencement today. And Yankee Stadium is located in Harlem area, and everyone avoids that area because it has a poor image. However, New York regenerated Harlem area, and that area hosted Yankee Stadium. And it was utilized to publicize New York State. So for Seoul, we have to work on hardware. We need landmark for visitors, but at the same time, we need to expand the infrastructure and we need to reinforce branding factors on our own. The third axis is software. When we visit Broadway, we watch musical. We are mostly forced to watch one musical when we visit Broadway. And most of the first-time visitors in New York, they go to Times Square. And it is similar in West End in London and Kabuki district in Tokyo. They are very symbolic areas for each city. And in case of Korea, we have K-pop, and Seoul is the mecca for K-pop. However, we do not have a permanent stadium for K-pop. We use a sports stadium instead. But if foreign visitors want to perform K-pop show, we do not have the space for that. And in Liverpool, we have a Beatles pilgrimage, and in Atlanta, we have a Margaret Mitchell tour. In Korea, we also have such programs. However, we do not have an iconic program for Seoul. So as I said before, when we look at the influence of cities, we have to look at sustainability, hardware, and software all together. And based on my presentation, let me present 4 suggestions. As I mentioned before, I believe we need a permanent stadium or performance hall for K-pop. So we have a permanent facility for Nanta performance. Before we did not have that, but now we have 2 in Seoul and 1 in Jeju-do Island. So many visitors can include Nanta performance in their trip schedule. Every Saturday or every Sunday, we can provide K-pop performance for visitors to enjoy. And second, I know that Seoul is already pushing forward this project. And in 2002, we had a mega sport event in Seoul, but after that we had none. So it has been already 20 years. So we are targeting 2032 Olympic Games. And we need to solve nuclear crisis with North Korea first. However, this could be an opportunity for Seoul to host another mega sport event, and it will help Seoul become the center of the global media messages. And the third factor is convention. We have COEX in Seoul, but most of the events were moved to Kintex. And in Seoul, they take the initiative. They have the initiative in Samsung-dong or Jamsil area, but I hope it will come into force. Due to the pandemic crisis, I know that it is difficult to make good on these initiatives, but I know that after COVID crisis, we will see the further development of the MICE industry in Seoul. The fourth is branding itself. And Seoul City is making efforts on this end. I worked with Pyeongchang Olympic Games, and mascot was very popular for the games actually. And each city around the world is selling character goods. And I hope Seoul would do that too. And universities and companies could use their own logo to make goods. So I hope Seoul would take the same approach. So instead of making money on those goods, I hope that Seoul, the logo itself, could get closer to visitors to Seoul. So after all, Seoul is a symbolic and iconic city of Korea. And Seoul brand includes passion, coexistence, and relaxation. These are the major values of the city brand. And Seoul should be beloved by global citizens, as well as Seoul citizens. And to this end, we need more active brand communication. We can utilize legacy media, but among the younger generation, social media is actively used, so we can tap into the new types of media. Seoul should sympathize and empathize with global citizens, and to this end, Seoul should take on more initiatives, and Seoul should play a role as a leader in many aspects. Thank you very much.
네, 사장님 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you for the presentation. And we listened to all the presentations, and let us move on to the discussion. And the moderator of the discussion is Professor Choi Eun-jung from Sangmyeong University.
It's a pleasure to meet with you. Professor of Business Administration of Sangmyeong University, Choi Eun-jung. It's an honor to be the moderator for the discussion in this Seoul Brand Forum. To summarize, in the new global era, we've talked about the strategic direction of the Seoul brand. So you have listened to 4 presentations. I want to summarize the presentations. In the post-COVID era, we need a new competence for the city was one of the key points. And as a brand, Seoul has important roles to play and has been managing the COVID crisis very well. To lead the global community, the Seoul brand has to take on several activities in terms of sustainability and creating new content. So in this pandemic, they have suggested new key points for the Seoul initiative to take on. And there were presentations on 2 different studies. In this paradigm shift, we need to be able to systematically evaluate the brand, which will entail development of new indicators and tools that were presented. And we also took a look on the relationship between COVID-19 and this whole city brand. I think they were very meaningful presentations. And we will now hold discussions in this order. I'm going to give you individual questions, so you could add comments in addition to your presentation. Later on, we're going to have a discussion, free discussion with all of you. Let me ask the first question to the first presenter, Mr. Park from SMG. As the Director General of Public Communication of SMG, you must be very aware of the activities of Seoul, and you have presented them very well. And I was curious about one thing. We need the role of Seoul as a destination brand, providing better experiences to visitors, and also a new brand for the citizens as well. And you also talked about the future. To be able to connect opportunities, capabilities, and experiences of Seoul in the eyes of the global citizens, as a brand, you must have various plans for 2021. So what are these activities and plans? For 2021, there are some trade secrets that I should not share, but let me share them with you in this special forum. Some of the overseas scholars have surprisingly mentioned some of the activities needed that we have been already preparing for. Dr. Sorman has mentioned the importance of safety, connecting safety with the image of Seoul, and Mr. Anholt mentioned responsibility and qualification, which are needed to be recognized as a global brand. And Dr. Attali also mentioned the term opportunity, which was quite impressive. We also thought about the keyword that would gain the interest of global people for 2021, and we thought that would be the word safety. We want to build a slogan, Save City Seoul, and under this slogan, we have been preparing a PR video. What was also surprising was that these global PR videos are used to promote Seoul, which is trying to catch up with global cities. And we tend to focus on the utilization of celebrities in the cultural sector and the arts sector in general. And Professor Lim has shown us the word cloud as a result of the survey on 1,000 people, and the term technology stood out. So for 2021, with a slogan, the Save City Seoul, we are preparing a PR video, and the models in that video are actually scientists. The safety can be related to technology. So in this sense, we thought the models or the actor should be able to represent these two keywords. So we used scientists in this PR video, and we thought this would make the video more friendly to the eyes of the global visitors. For print media and online media, we are going to utilize these PR materials to promote Seoul as a safe city that has been realized by the participation of many Seoulites. So thank you for that trade secret. So I hope Seoul becomes a leading brand by utilizing safety and technology. Thank you. I have another question for you. So in this pandemic and for the post-COVID era, many people are trying to prepare in advance. And you mentioned 3 important functions: maintenance of city function, connection between cities, and resilience. So from your opinion, for the role of the brand impacting the competence of the city, so what kind of role would the I-Seoul-U, the Seoul brand, play in the competence of cities? So we don't have actually academic research on this area, but after we built the brand I-Seoul-U, I believe we have made efforts to become friendlier to the eyes of our citizens. You can see the symbol of I-Seoul-U on this table, and these were exposed to all squares, public squares in Seoul, and public agency buildings, so that they would seem closer to the hearts of citizens rather than just being an official public building. And during the COVID pandemic, I hope that the Seoul City Office stands not just as a public building, but as a public space that's created with the participation of the citizens. And we have actually done so in the past, and I believe that emotionally this really helped overcome and deal with the COVID crisis for our citizens. And in terms of intercity connection, Mr. Kim from KPR mentioned Citizens Against COVID-19 CAC Summit as a venue to share our experiences. And we also promoted I-Seoul-U in that event as well. So it's not just to boast Seoul of our achievements, but we wanted to show the spirit of the I-Seoul-U as a brand to build a more positive image of Seoul. So the connecting factor of I-Seoul-U was quite viable.
Now let me ask questions to Professor Lim, our second speaker. So the survey was conducted on 1,043 respondents, and you shared the research outcome. It was a very interesting presentation. And about 40% of respondents were from North America, 14.7% South America, 27.6% from Europe. And about 40% of the respondents have visited Seoul. And was there any difference by regions? And their experience in Seoul impacted the result? Were there any interesting insight? Please share your insights. So we had variables, many variables, and the data is huge. So we are still analyzing the data, and there are some interesting facts. People who have visited Seoul before, so they consisted of 40%, and 60% have never visited Seoul before. And people who never visited Seoul, we wanted to know their perception on Seoul. So we looked at their data, and people without previous visits, and only 20% of them said they don't know about Seoul at all. So although they have never visited Seoul before. 80% of those people answered they know about Seoul at a certain level. So getting to know some cities could be conducted through indirect experiences. That was our interesting outcome. And of course, people who have previous visits gave more positive evaluation because they had great experiences and they have great memories, so they gave more positive evaluation. However, even people without previous visits, they have still good images about Seoul. So when we look at the data in general, their experience visiting Seoul did not impact. Rather, their knowledge level of Seoul impacted more. So communication strategy is a powerful tool. We realize that because although they never visited Seoul, they got to know Seoul through media, and they could build up their attitude toward Seoul based on that. And you talked about geographical differences, but just like the previous factor, the knowledge level makes the difference. Of course, our sample is not perfect, but we analyzed various continents, and there was not much difference between continents. In particular, in terms of technology, respondents from all continents gave a high score. So it is not about a particular continent. Because we are living in a globalized era, you can collect information on Seoul anywhere. So there was no difference between continents, and citizens around the world have a similar perception on Seoul. That is very interesting because we focused on localization marketing. However, in the global market, I believe that we can work on a single market and we can deliver appealing points to the consumers in the global market. And I look forward to the future outcome after the analysis. And this is the second question. So I understand that there are two axes of brand evaluation. So you introduced the brand index, and you also introduced the brand personality. And in marketing, these two measurements are used separately. And many global citizens are watching this forum right now. So there must be city brand-related workers and researchers. So how can you utilize these two measurements separately, and can you give us a guideline? A guideline sounds too big, but when I was studying this measurement, I learned something, and I would like to suggest this. The result of our study found out that in case of a brand index, it is more about cognitive image. However, brand personality is more about sentimental evaluation on a certain city. So if we use a brand index to evaluate competences of the city, we would think about the nature of the city. For example, whether this city has many hospitals or not, whether I can walk around at night in this city or not. So this is based on cognitive information. So in case of cognitive information, I believe that you can use a brand index. But for example, if this city is safe, this city is dangerous, and this kind of a statement can be measured better by brand personality, and you can get better results through brand personality. So if you utilize these measurements in your work, you have to think about what you want to receive from the respondents. Is it more cognitive or is it more sentimental? And you can pick the measurement based on that information. And Mr. Park Jin-young, made a comment that he will focus on security in 2021. But if it is a sentimental approach, it is brand personality, and if it is more cognitive, it is brand index. Is that correct? Yes, correct.
Next, I would like to ask Professor Jeon. You gave a very interesting presentation, and it was similar to the gist of other presentations. So you divided the communication as a brand in emotional aspects and reason or practical aspects. So symbols or visual symbols are means of emotional communication, and the attitude toward COVID response of a city and city competence would be closer to the side of the practical aspect of communication. So regarding COVID response and technology, Seoul has been promoting its competence, which would be closer to the pragmatic side or practical side. But in terms of emotional communication, what kind of efforts does Seoul need? In fact, branding is a communication strategy, so you need a lot of soft tools. Visual symbols are the leading example. And if a city were to build a brand, is first come up with a logo or change a logo and come up with a character. So these are soft sides and factors, but you need a deeper strategy. Due to COVID-19, quarantine and healthcare have been gaining more importance, but in fact, for a city to have value as a brand and build assets, you need to have substance. As in the case of New York, New York is a hip city, has a lot of landmarks and assets. For example, the musical industry that I've mentioned, it's a form of entertainment, but it's also a physical asset for the city. So in terms of communication, we have been utilizing a lot of emotional aspects, focusing on the visual symbols and characters, but we need to actually pay attention to the substance of the city and appeal that to our visitors and citizens. As the next strategy, Seoul has a lot of assets. When you think of Korea, actually in the minds of foreigners, it's hard to distinguish from Seoul. That itself is an asset of Seoul because Korea is Seoul. So we can utilize different assets of Korea, and also we need to come up with the original brand of Seoul. You have been doing very well in terms of soft communication, emotional communication. But we could actually focus on the substantial actual performance and achievements of Seoul going forward. So in general, in order to strengthen what is intangible, we need to see opportunity in the tangible. I think that's what you meant. So we need to leverage the substance, the tangible assets of Seoul. And this is my second question. You have studied MERS, and we have COVID-19, so you must have a lot of insights to share. Effective response to infectious disease can be an asset to the city brand you mentioned. Are there any examples that demonstrate this? We could learn from these examples, I think. In the case of infectious disease, there's a cycle. It's not permanent. So building a city brand by controlling infectious disease, there aren't many examples. But in the case of companies, managing a crisis has an important side to managing the brand. For example, you can see Tylenol. The product was recalled to overcome this crisis for that company, and there are many examples like this. One example I would like to introduce is related to the city brand. Once again, New York comes up. New York has a lot of brand assets, soft and hard, musicals, broadcasting, advertising, and it's the center of finance and a tourist destination. The most important thing is safety. I visited New York the first time in 1994, and it was suicide to get on the subway. You couldn't get on the subway, and my colleagues warned me not to get on the subway. It was one of the important tips that you get. So when I drove to New York, I tried to avoid the dangerous areas, including the Harlem. And when I was in university, I visited New York, and recently I paid a visit again, and you can see the improvement of public safety in Times Square. Every 20 meters you can see a policeman standing. Policeman doesn't guarantee safety, but I think that says something. So these beautiful assets of New York can be experienced only by visiting, but now, except for certain regions, it's not dangerous to visit New York. So, building a safe image of New York was one of the important factors in building its brand. There are many threatening factors in terms of safety for a city. Removing them effectively and utilizing them for your strategy would create success for your branding efforts. It's not infectious diseases related, but that's an example. Of course, you cannot visit New York right now because it's not controlling the situation better than Seoul, but we can learn from the past experiences of New York. So you have mentioned the important factors for city branding. A reference for Seoul from New York.
So now I have a question for Mr. Kim Joo-ho. So why the Seoul Initiative? That was a very challenging presentation title. So it was very eye-catching to see the capability to send a message as a city brand, and you also mentioned the sustainability of that capability. And at the level of a brand communication, for city brands to keep sending messages, I believe that there must be governance issues. So along with content development, Seoul brand should be sustained in the management system. And do you have any advice on the management system for Seoul brand? When we look at the logo of I Seoul U, it is promoted by a department in Seoul Metropolitan Government. But when we look at the micro side, these goods and logo could be the factor. However, when we look at the macro level, we need to see the hardware and infrastructure in the entire city. So although there are many people working on this matter, I believe that the difference comes from the decision by CEO. So we have Director General of Public Communications here, but I think we need to look at the level of mayor and deputy mayor of the city so that we can make a landmark as a brand and we can tap into soft power where we can allocate more budget. This kind of decisions should be made by a higher level. So Seoul mayor or deputy mayor, these higher ranking officials should think about the budget and they should maintain their will to sustain this Seoul brand. So in terms of governance, I believe that mayor and deputy mayor should play an important role. As you know, brand business administration was very sensational in Korea, and many companies adopted this idea. So I think it has a similar context. Although it is a public agency, we need to build the governance, and we need to resort on leadership of higher ranking officials. And this is the second question for you. And Seoul brand I Seoul You is led by people. It is a very unique brand which was selected by people themselves. So to deliver the new status of Seoul, you mentioned social media. You highlighted the importance of social media. So since I Seoul You is people-led, people-centered idea, do you have any detailed measures we can utilize for content development? When we created I Seoul You, so we had 3 proposals, and Seoul citizens voted and selected the brand. And you keep saying citizen-led idea, but when we look at the digital side, after all, people communicate in the digital territory, so it is not completely different channel. And Seoul City is utilizing various channels these days in and out of Korea. But the major target is the younger generation after all. So we should keep sending messages to the younger generation, because they will spread those messages on SNS and social media themselves. I mentioned examples of Josumi, BTS, and Steve McCurry, and the Director General mentioned the idea of scientists. But we need to look at the bigger picture now. From the global perspective, we can find some celebrities who are popular even in other countries as well. Then we can communicate with global citizens better. So we have to target the younger generation. And social media is a better tool for people-centered ideas. So this is the topic we will discuss in common.
So we don't have a lot of chance to have all the experts at one venue. The first question. In the keynote speech, Professor Kim gave us a keyword, the new global era. So in your opinion, how would you define the new global era? It's very difficult, right? So usually in forums, we coin new terms and come up with new concepts. So no pressure. What would be the definition of a new global era? In my opinion, a new global era, well, the term global has a lot of different meanings. Till now, we use the term globalization. And nowadays, due to various global issues, I think it's facing a crisis. Countries are applying trade protectionism and focused on capitalism. And in my field, marketing and advertisement, in the past, Korea found a lot of challenges to make exports. And to export to a certain country, I've been emphasizing the importance of understanding the culture and the environment of the country. I think that argument is valid. And in the new global, until now, we have been trying to sell a lot of products and be friendly with other countries. Of course, business, diplomacy, and trade is important, but we need an approach that converges all of these factors. And we've been focused on the US because there was a lot of things global in the US. We have paid a lot of attention to the American and European markets, but in fact, for Korea, I think the Asian market matters more. I have shown you a survey, especially on China today. And COVID started in China and have a strong risk perception toward COVID because of this. But whether we like it or not, China is a country that we have to go together as a business partner. So I think we need to focus on Northeast Asia. I'm not into politics, I'm not interested, but in terms of business, China, Japan, and Korea, the Northeast Asian countries, are facing a lot of discomfort and tension in the relationship. So we need to discover a solution. In Southeast Asia, India, the markets that have been neglected in the past are the new focus areas. So for Korea and Seoul, for our interest, I think we need to primarily look toward the Asian market, expand our understanding, and in terms of city branding, build a close relationship with our neighbors first. So that would be the new approach for a new global era, I think.
So my answer is in the similar context. It's not totalitarianism, but it is more of nationalism. So we have a G20, G7, but this kind of concept will not be appealing to people around the world. And some countries are withdrawing from global treaty. And this kind of a treaty will not be effective at all in the future because of the pandemic situation. So I believe the collaboration between cities will be more effective. During the recent quarantine, I saw that each city responded in their own way. So maybe diplomacy and trade and communication will be at the city level compared to the national level in the new global era. That's a very interesting idea. People thought about the problems of globalization. And in the post-COVID area, we will build a territory around us and we will take a new approach. That was the essence of the idea.
I think before the outbreak of COVID, geographical factors mattered. I agree. And we also had focus on Asia because it's closer and it's easier for the visitors from Asia to come to Korea. And with the outbreak of COVID, the faraway places that we didn't have a lot of interest before, like Latin American countries and African countries, under the common issue of COVID-19, we were able to make exchanges and share our ideas. So economically, the world has been integrated, but there are countries that, in fact, we have been lacking interest in. But now we have the common issue of COVID, which provides a new opportunity. So that was a very good response. I think it's a little different from what you previously mentioned. There were areas that could not be connected, but they are connected now thanks to COVID. So So we have new standards of grouping or zoning. An interesting issue, and we could talk overnight about this. Now let me go to the second question.
Our theme is a Seoul Initiative, and we need to develop new initiatives, and at the same time we need to reinforce something we have. At this point, we have a lot of opportunities. And to secure Seoul Initiative, do you have any suggestions on new themes or agenda? You can share your opinions freely. In fact, the entire world is facing a common challenge and threat. And in these difficult times, most of the times, think about whether they can trust the others. And they focus more on warmth of others. And we talk about CSR activities of companies. And many people are more focused on CSR activities of the brand these days. And in this new global era, if Seoul wants to take the initiative, I believe that Seoul needs to build the image that Seoul will not ruin the others. And Seoul is open to everyone. And Seoul is the city of coexistence. I think that could be the direction Seoul could take. So it is about the image. And any other ideas? So in your presentation, you already suggested new ideas and new agenda. But still, if you have more ideas. So when we were trying to host the Pyeongchang Olympic Games, we failed twice before. And we had a dream program in Kwangwoon province. So most of the Latin American countries and Middle East countries, they do not have snow. And in Africa too. So we invited the children from those continents and we taught skiing to them. But we kept on operating such programs, although we failed to host the Olympic Games. And it became a huge asset for us. And we still operate the same program even today. So it is a good idea for CSR activities. And it could be a little bit off the topic. But in terms of city brand, and how can we connect city brand to the infrastructure or hardware? So about 3 years ago, I worked with the Seoul City, and I suggested the motif of chair. When you go to other countries, for example, Helsinki in Finland, they successfully conducted city branding with the motif of chair. So I-Seoul is a very visible logo, and chair is a convenient tool for people. There are many chairs located in Seoul, and if we utilize the design of such chairs, and we can tap into the chairs as a communication channel. So it is not an initiative level, but I still want to share this idea. So it is. Are there any other themes and agenda you would like to suggest? So in the process of your presentation, you already shared many ideas.
And this is the last question for the discussion. As mentioned, I-Seoul marks the 5th anniversary. It's its birthday today. When we talk about brand management, whether it's in the public or private sector, with a change of leadership, the brand can be threatened in terms of its existence. So in terms of sustainability, and for the global city brand to expand globally and provide a chance to show the capability and opportunities in this Seoul, what kind of effort should we make in terms of I Seoul U to expand the brand and grow the brand? One of the leading example of soft communication means is visual symbols. And with the slogan of I Seoul U, there were a lot of controversy and a lot of challenges. It's been 5 years and it has solidified its position to a certain level. There are many different factors composing a brand according to different scholars, and tradition or heritage is one important factor. In Korea, there are brands that have the image of innovation and competitiveness, but not many that has an image of heritage, which can play a positive role for the image of Korea. So in terms of the long-term strategy, I've mentioned this a lot, but I hope the I Seoul U brand is maintained in the long run. There will be a lot of different comments about this, but the important thing is it's very difficult to make the brand or build a brand in the first place. In Korea, when a new car is launched, they come up with a new name or a different design. But at least the name of the brand in terms of global branding should be consistent. Even Hyundai Motors continue using their old brand names in the US market, overseas market, because it's hard to build a brand image. If we change from Hye Seoul to I Seoul U or other brands, there would be preferences, but expanding the level of awareness or recognition is very challenging for the visitors and the citizens. It's been 5 years and it's been perceived quite widely, but to lose it once again would be a mistake. So although there are some issues with it, we should push forward with it and maintain it for the long run. So I understand the concern regarding sustainability and consistency. It's not the concern of only Seoul. In fact, regarding I Seoul U, there were special characteristics in the process of coming up with it rather than the result was proposed by the citizens and was selected with the voting of the citizens. So I don't think there is a large possibility that it will change in the future. We already have sustainability. And the preference and recognition level is more than 70% among the citizens already. So it will be maintained, and there could be a little bit tunings and tweaks in the future, but it will be sustained.
So in the discussion, we found out that I Seoul U is utilized in the sentimental manner and in the physical manner at the same time. So 4 panelists delivered the presentation and they also shared various opinions in the discussion. So I would like to thank our panelists. And wrapping up the discussion, let me mention one thing. So I serve as a moderator many times, and I look forward to the next topic of the Seoul Brand Forum. And how can we develop this initiative we discussed today? Thank you very much. It was such an interesting discussion, so I would like to thank our moderator and other panelists as well. The 5th Seoul Brand Global Forum explored future direction for city brands in the new global era, and we also talked about ideas on initiative for Seoul as a global city brand. And today's forum can be watched again on Seoul Metropolitan Government's YouTube channel. Lastly, for our speakers and Seoul citizens, we prepared a video clip to highlight the meaning of cities and Seoul. This video clip will officially end today's forum. Thank you very much for staying with us.
A city is a laboratory for the future of humanity.
현재 진행형이다.
중지? 정체성이다. 연결?
세상 편안한 곳이다.
놀이터다. 따뜻한 가족입니다.
공동체다.
우리가 살아가는 곳입니다.
많은 사람들의 꿈과 희망이 실현되는 공간이라고 생각합니다.
다양한 사람들의 삶의 터전이라고 생각합니다.
Seoul is one of the most important cities in the world, the most vibrant and creative city in Asia and around the world.
Seoul is an international actor with a huge potential for good.
서울이란 한강이다. 대한민국의 얼굴이다.
자신감이다. 자랑거리다.
로망이다. 쉼터입니다.
기회라고 생각합니다.
대한민국의 심장이고
중심지다.
Be brave, be imaginative, be good to Seoul.
더 많은 소통과 참여의 기회를 줄 수 있는 그러한 터전이 되었으면 합니다.
지금처럼 잘 부탁해.
지금처럼만 하자.
고마워. 조금만 더 신세질게.
서울아, 코로나19에 지지 말고
건강하자.
매일매일 즐겁게 지내자.
우리 계속 행복하자.
조금만 더 힘내서 화이팅 했으면 좋겠습니다.
서울아 고마워.